Good morning and welcome to City Hall. We'll get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Kevin Rogers is the Executive Director of Reaching Our City Incorporated. He's going to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Larry McAtee if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Would you bow your heads with me? Dear God the Father, our Creator and our friend, I've been asked to lift the prayers of this assembly of the called and elect servants of Oklahoma City. We are honored to pause before you and request your wisdom and your counsel. We pray that you might bend near as our prayers are full with thanksgiving and with need, with praise and with conflict, with the reflections of accomplishment, and with the fears of the great challenges before this council. You have placed into the hands of these few great authority and power. It is our hope that a sense of justice prevails upon each decision, that each action be tempered with patience, and that each outcome represent the high hopes of this community and this people. We ask again that you might show favor on this city. Gathered here are people who would give their shirts from their backs to serve another. The people of this community have offered their resources with our neighbors and friends. We've watched a city rise to the occasion against disaster, a city that has persevered against extreme obstacles, a city that has recovered from the loss of our loved ones, a city that has found strength in our service to others. May we find again today, in our service to each other and to God, that strength to overcome. As these have so adequately demonstrated, teach us to love one another. I thank you for each one represented here, for their tireless hours of service, and for their dedication to the people of Oklahoma City. Pause near each one and allow them to slip between the here and the now and the eternal for just a few moments. To him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power at work within us. Amen.
Amen.
Face the flag. Salute. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a special treat this morning that I think reflects the wonderful association our city has with Oklahoma City University. We have a couple of young artists who are here to give us an advanced preview of a performance that will be coming up on the OCU campus. So I'll ask John Ritchie and Amanda Meyer to come forward. Amanda has been here before. I met John this morning. He's originally from St. Louis, but now that he's a senior, he kind of feels like Oklahoma City is his new home. So we're pleased to have both of you here. This is a performance from a French opera that's coming up, and we'll give you a little more information after they give us an example of what people can expect.
And this is from Tales of Hoffmann, which is a French opera by Jacques Offenbach, written in the 1800s. It tells the story of the real-life poet E.T.A. Hoffmann, some of his short stories condensed into an opera. It tells the story of his various tragic loves and is done prologue, epilogue, and then the actual stories are in the middle. And this selection comes from the Antonia act, his second love, played by Amanda Meyer.
And I would say Antonia is the most pure and sweet and simple girl you can probably imagine. She's the only one of Hoffman's loves who really, truly does love him. And unfortunately, she has a terrible unnamed illness. She loves to sing, but when she sings, it causes her to cough and be very ill. And so she meets a tragic end in the opera, but this morning we will present to you a duet that finds Antonia and Hoffman very much in love and in happier times.
A couple of typical young people who live in Oklahoma City. We're so pleased to have you all around, and let me give you the microphone back, and you can tell people how they can get tickets for the rest of the performance.
Okay. The performances are this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday and Saturday, they are at 8 p.m. Sunday, it's at 3 p.m., and they are all in the Kirkpatrick Auditorium. The ticket information...
Sure. You can purchase tickets by the phone. It's 405-208-5600. 5227. And the box office, the phone line is open Monday through Friday from 1 to 4 p.m. Or you can go online 24 hours a day. It's www.okcu.edu/ticket office. And we would love to see any and all of you there. It's a wonderful show. It's a great visual treat, lots of spectacle. So thank you for having us this morning.
Let's show our appreciation one more time. Thanks very much. Wow. And right on cue, it is Allied Arts Month. And I know Tricia's here along with Deborah Center and James Pickle. Y'all want to come forward? You're looking at all three of you chairs. I keep forgetting exactly.
Tricia and I are the chairs, and
Deborah's the executive director. She takes charge and runs you guys ragged.
That's right.
Well, I understand the fundraising is going very well, but I'm going to hand the microphone to Deborah and let the three of you do whatever you need to do. And we also have a proclamation that we want to read. But first of all, tell us a little bit about the campaign.
Great. James, you can sing now.
Had I known we were going to be able to sing, I would have brought my own music, but without that, I'll let it pass. You've heard an example of exactly why we are so supportive of the arts. Everyone in this community is benefiting from the arts. Whether you listen to the radio or watch TV or go to the opera or go to a museum or go to the Festival of the Arts, you are benefiting from our cultural community. And what Allied Arts does is we raise the hard dollars for about 20 member agencies. And when I say the hard dollars, it's the operating funds. It's easier for our arts agencies to raise money for their programs, their festivals, their ballets. All of those things are easier dollars to raise. They're sponsorship dollars, project dollars, those types of monies. What we do is we raise the operating funds. And I want to say thank you to the mayor. I want to say thank you to all of the city council for proclaiming February as Allied Arts Month. I know that several of our city council members have already made a donation to this year's campaign, and I'm sure the rest of them are about to write their check. I also want to thank the mayor and the city manager and everyone at the Horseshoe for allowing us to do a workplace campaign for all of the city employees. It is an extremely easy way for us to reach a lot of people, and that is what we're trying to do this year, is reach a lot of people. And I want to say a special thank you to Tricia Everest for agreeing to be the co-chair this year and putting up with me on a regular basis. And now I'll hand the microphone to Deborah, and she can clean up whatever I've messed up.
Well, I just want to also echo the thanks to the mayor and council, because it has been an exciting time to be part of Oklahoma City. The last 10 years, we've seen the arts completely transform right along with the city, and we hope to see even further growth. And Allied Arts is anticipating growth among our 20-member agencies. Our goal this year is to raise over $3 million, and we are quite certain that we can do it. Right now, we're sitting at 2.25. But we believe that we are delivering things to the city that would be missed if the Allied Arts were not here. Teaching children in school things that can't be learned in textbooks alone, helping our city certainly through economic development, helping to attract businesses here with all of the exciting things that we have going on, and having our arts groups perform at even higher levels than they ever have before. And also, if you would like to see our video featuring Mayor Cornett, please visit our website, because it is posted there, and he does a fabulous job. We're trying to touch all the city. It's every man that we want to attract the arts to. We have free events so that the arts are accessible to all, and so that arts education is very well in place in our schools. That's it. Thank you for letting us bring our story to you today.
We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read it, and we'll get settled here.
Sorry. Whereas the month of February has been recognized as Allied Arts Month by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City and hundreds of nonprofit organizations, local businesses, and community at large for 4 decades. Whereas the arts enhance and enrich the lives of all Oklahoma City residents from all walks of life and backgrounds. And whereas the arts and humanities embody much of the accumulated wisdom, intellect, and imagination of humankind. Whereas the nonprofit arts industry has a $314.8 million impact on our state's economy, supports the full-time equivalent of 10,156 jobs, and generates more than $29 million in state and local government revenues. Whereas Allied Arts has served as a champion of Central Oklahoma's art community and has raised more than $45 million since 1971. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim the month of February 2012 as Allied Arts Month in Oklahoma City and urges citizens to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in our community and to especially encourage greater participation in the arts by all, the young and the not so young.
Let's show our appreciation to this group and as well as others that support the arts. Thank you all what you're doing. Take this way. Great, cookies. Yeah, we got to gain our 1,000,000 pounds back. Great.
Mayor, I have to tell you, having heard Mr. Pickles sing, there's a reason why we didn't tell him to bring music. The Allied Arts Group, speaking as the president of an organization that receives funding from Allied Arts to help the Arts Council in our mission, I just want to say a big thank you, and we certainly appreciate the support that it does for all those agencies. There's a number of them out there that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Allied Arts. So they provide an excellent service.
We appreciate you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. It is also Irish American Day coming up, along with March 17th. So let's ask, Paula Jones, come on forward. Tim, come on up. And Pat Rooney is the parade. There's Pat. I didn't know Pat had slipped in. Come on in, Pat. Pat is the parade marshal this year. We have a proclamation for Irish American Day. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled up front.
Whereas Irish Americans have made important contributions to American art, music, and literature. And whereas many Oklahomans claim ancestors who were immigrants from Ireland. Whereas in the past decade, Oklahoma has experienced a significant flow of migration to the state, and many of the residents are of recent immigrant stock. Whereas St. Patrick's Day is a traditional occasion of honoring the contribution of Irish heritage to Americans. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim March 17, 2012 as Irish American Day in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation for St. Patrick's Day festivities that are coming up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. We appreciate so much every year you guys doing this for us and letting the parade happen. We have found that as Oklahoma City has grown, so has the parade. And we're excited to be that part because we bring joy to so many thousands of people. And it's a family event, which is another thing we're very, very proud of. So we appreciate it very, very much. It will be this year on March 17th, actually St. Patrick's Day, which is, doesn't roll around every time, so thank goodness for this one. It's also the 30th year, so we will be 30 years old, which is a huge milestone. Not exactly New York City, but still 30 years old.
What's the route?
The route is going to begin on Broadway and 5th, and then come down E.K. Gaylord south, and then go into Bricktown. So it will be a nice route. Bleacher seating for those who come early in Bricktown.
Where would people gather? In Bricktown?
There's a lot gather in Bricktown, and then also along the route, along E.K. Gaylord, on both sides.
What time should they show up?
Parade starts at 1 o'clock, and you need to be there at least by noon.
Okay, so noon on March 17th.
March 17th.
So we're
So-
quite a month away.
Come on down. Get ready.
And you'll have grandstand seating there. And
We will.
The weather will be perfect.
It's always absolutely perfect. Even if it's raining, snowing, sleeting, it's better than New York, Boston, Chicago. Come on down.
Well, we appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and good luck as the parade marshal, Pat.
Thank you. Thank
bet.
you.
Bet. Well, thanks very much. I'll exchange then, give you the proclamation. Thank you all very much. We appreciate what y'all do every day of the year for us. Thanks. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
See you. Great. Okay. Great. As we call the meeting to order, we'll begin on item 4, the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for February 14th, and item 4B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for February 7th. Any comments or questions on the Journal? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item 5. It's request for uncontested continuances.
Mayor, starting on page 8, under item 8A, SPUD 626, that's the cell tower. The applicant and the protesters' representative have agreed to defer this item until the March 6th. Again, that's 8A, SPUD 626. We'll defer that until March 6th. On page 9, under item 8E1B, 2304 North Everest Avenue, we ask that that be stricken. We need to re-notify. And on page 10, under item Z, 611 Northwest 95th Street, we need to strike the owner has secured.
All right. Any other requests for uncontested continuances? Well, let's recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. There are 5 items. Comments or questions on the MFA? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. There is 1 item. Comments or questions on the PPA item? All right, cast your votes there, and it passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust for consideration of 2 items. Comments or questions on the EAT? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. All right, it's been motioned and seconded. Subject to individual considerations. Are there any individual considerations today?
Your Honor, I have a couple of minor questions on F1, F2, and J.
All right, thanks, Pat.
Mayor, I'd like to comment on L.
L?
Yes.
All right.
And on B, I guess that would be B1 and 2, Mayor.
All right, B1.
No, actually, it's C.
Okay.
And I just have a couple of questions in reference to either staff or the applicant, I think. Staff would be.
Okay. Pat, you want to get us started with F1, F2, and T?
J, Your Honor, I think.
J. I can't read my own writing.
I can say something about T if you'd like, but F1, I just have rather than a question, I should have described it as a comment. This is a project to hire a consulting services company to help us with our OKC plan. And it's got some objectives that I think we need to be very careful about when we use these objectives in the future, because I don't think we ought to dictate to the community exactly what has to happen. I think this might be a good guideline, but I think it should be remembered that it is a guideline.
And that is our intent, sir, is the policy decisions are made by this board.
Thank you. The other F2 is a similar thing. This is a contract to deal with our abandoned structures in the city. My question was, do we have the authority here to deal with that, or do we need additional ordinances written to give us some authority to deal with these?
It depends which level you want to go with. There are some things that have been done in other Oklahoma cities. There are some things that have been in other cities across the country that would take legislative modifications to allow Oklahoma City to do it. So it all depends on how far you'd like to go down this road. And all we're doing at this point in time is identifying those options, what those obstacles are, and the potential cost that these are having on Oklahoma City to justify any potential fees that we may choose to levy in the future.
And maybe this is a premature question, but are the majority of these outside city ownerships, abandoned structure?
Well, I think that's something we're probably going to determine, okay. And I think it's mixed, but I think there are a bunch of those that are. You're talking about vacant properties whose owners do not reside within the
and obviously they're paying the taxes on them, because otherwise they would be
right
disposed of through tax sales. But I think I understand there's a significant number of these buildings within Oklahoma City, at least as a result of the preliminary information we got from the Postal Services. And so it's not a minor problem as we go forward. It's just a significant problem and significant cost to the city to make these. And I think that major concern is the impact these abandoned structures have on the adjoining neighborhoods.
And all this, say, will give us is a tool to make decisions by this council to help identify what options are out there, what the cost of this is to the city, to help us justify any fees that we may choose to establish in the future, if we choose to do that.
And if there's a way to empirically inject in our considerations the costs associated with the deterioration of the adjoining neighborhoods, I think that would be a good number to have in mind.
Okay. Russell, you want to comment on that?
That is part of the scope as well. We want to make sure that we get a pretty clear picture on what those external impacts are, not just the cost that caused by the building itself to the services that we provide, but the cost to the neighborhood. I think that's really important. And the neighborhoods are very, very anxious to have that information.
Thank you.
I have just read a couple of articles about this and dealing with it in other communities, and some communities have actually gotten very proactive and very aggressive about taking down these vacant houses, and so I think we ought to take a look at best practices, I'm sure you are, to see what changes we might be able to make.
Yeah, it's really to gather all the information that's going to be necessary for you to make policy decisions on this. We don't understand the full scope of the problem. We have some understanding that it's an issue, but we don't know exactly what it is and what those particular impacts are on the community. That's what we need to identify so that we can then, the consultant will also offer up recommendations on what potential solutions may be.
Great.
For your consideration.
At the present time, do we have a defined standard or a definition of what is an abandoned building?
We have the ordinance that deals with dilapidated structures, but not really with abandoned buildings. So if you secure the building can still stay there empty for long periods of time, which is what we're seeing. I mean, there's some buildings that have been empty for several decades, and that has a negative impact outside of just the dilapidation criteria.
Russell, the definition of an abandoned building will include multifamily structures that fit that category also?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
And I would hope it wouldn't just focus on residential.
It's residential, commercial, it's essentially any empty building.
Good.
Any other comments or questions for Russell? All right, thanks. Pat, that wrap up your comments?
No, I have one on item J, and I'll have to admit that all I want is somebody to explain what this really said. I've had a little trouble, and of course it may have been late at night, but understanding exactly what was transpiring in this one. So if you could, Jim, ask either Eric or Dennis. I don't really take up the time this morning. But
I think I can summarize after the meeting.
I'm sorry?
You can get with him after the meeting.
Be happy to do so, Councilman.
I just hate to take up the time to deal with my own inability to understand this, but I would like a little explanation. Thank you.
All right. Pete, item L.
It's my understanding that the Parks Director is going to make a presentation on L, and so he'll probably cover all the nice things I was going to say about the new park, so I could pass.
Are we doing that in the consent docket? Are we doing that? Right now. Okay, great.
We had 7.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. For the viewing public, I'm Wendell Whisenhunt. I'm Director of Parks and Recreation for Oklahoma City. Park directors like to speak to elected bodies about big projects that we're proposing, and we've been able to do a lot of that over the last few years as a result of the bond issues that the public has approved, and it's very pleasing to be able to offer these new things to the citizens of Oklahoma City. And as soon as this comes up, I'll tell you about another one.
We're waiting anxiously.
Today, before you on your agenda is a joint resolution with the Water Trust that would designate the lake and 160 acres of land at Southeast 119th and Sooner Road, which is often referred to as Kitchen Lake, as the new designated park that is called for in the 07 bond issue for Southeast Oklahoma City. Funds are available or will be available after the next bond sale So the funds will be available in approximately June. There will be approximately $719,000 available from that bond issue in June. And staff has become aware of this site and has visited it already. And as a matter of fact, the Utilities Department has already done quite a lot of cleanup and work at the site that's made it look better and kind of got the process started. Again, the site is at 119th and Sooner Road. You'll see that overhead depiction of that site now. We're interested in it because it has an already existing recreational facility, a lake. That's always an advantage when you start with something that's already there. The lake is 38 to 40 acres. We've already sampled the fishing there. We find it to be a very good place to fish now, and it hasn't been stocked in many years. So as we begin to stock it with our fish hatchery and the help of the State Wildlife Department, it will be an excellent fishery. Just to give you some perspective on the size, for those of you who are familiar with DeLisi Park Lake, DeLisi Park Lake is about 20 acres. Again, this is 38 to 40. The Zoo Lake is about 30, so that gives you some perspective on the size. We have been watching the lake closely as we've gone through this drought because we're always interested in how well a lake holds water, and we found that it held water very well. The drought had minor effects on it. It holds great potential for future development. We think it fulfills the requirements for a site that people would like to visit and spend significant amounts of time when they arrive. It's accessible easily from I-240 and I-35. It is a mixture of native woods, a very clear lake surface, wetlands, and open pasture, making it very developable. The lake area has been referred to for many years as Kitchen Lake. Of course, we haven't named it. That refers to the family that once occupied the area. This is an aerial view giving you some idea of what the area looks like and what adjoins it. The Water Trust owns the 160 acres that this lake sits on. It is part of the West Elm Creek Reservation. What you see before you here is a conceptual development sketch for the entire area. We're not proposing today to develop that area in its entirety, but we have it phased for potential future development beyond the phase we're speaking to you about today. The plan that we're going to be talking with you about today primarily is enhancing the fishing opportunities. Future phases would include family gathering areas, all of the typical park improvements that you'd find in a large park like this, like playgrounds, basketball courts, lake overlooks, and areas for exercise. Athletic fields would be in a phase, and in a later phase, we have proposed consideration of a dog park. Phase one, which we're proposing to do from the 07 bond issue, is about 10.5 acres. Again, we have had our fish biologists already looking at this area, and we're convinced that it'll be a good fishery from the start, but we'll be able to improve it significantly. You see before you a depiction of the phase one of this plan, which is what we're proposing to do at this time. We would propose accessible fishing docks, natural and accessible bank fishing areas, the creation of the roads and parking necessary to make this successful, accessible walking paths, shelters, landscaping, benches, and picnic tables in the first phase. This slide gives you an idea of a timeline. It's a rough timeline, and we'll know more about it as the project proceeds, but with the funds becoming available in June and bidding and contract awards, we would expect to have the project all but completed in July of 2013. We will continue, as we always do, to speak with the Wildlife Department, State Wildlife Department, to explore what grants may be available for reimbursements for any of the expenses that we have for the creation of this park, and there undoubtedly will be some that we will be able to be reimbursed for. So we're excited about this. We're anxious to get started. We know that people will drive to this park and spend a significant amount of time, And fishing is something that always succeeds in Oklahoma City, and we would anticipate this being a very successful development. I would try to answer any questions you may have.
I'm trying to get an idea how big that lake is.
It's about 40 acres, 38 to 40 acres, and DeLisi's 20, if you kind of have in mind what DeLisi is.
That's pretty big then.
Yes, sir, it is. It's a very nice lake, and as I mentioned, it has a very clear surface, much clearer than many lakes, ponds in this part of the country.
Wendell, did you say how much is available in the 07 bond issue for this park?
$719,000.
Any other comments or questions for Wendell on this issue? Yeah, Larry and then Pete.
Well, question for Jim. This park is in Cleveland County?
Yes, sir.
And so therefore, it would not be eligible for the cleanup efforts that were done on Crystal Lake by the Shine Group?
That's correct. Good question, though.
It's a spring-fed lake, and that's the reason it has it doesn't lose the water like just a normal pond would. It's spring-fed. It has a dam that holds the water there, but water is much clearer, much higher water quality because it's spring-fed. It's not runoff. There may be a little runoff, but not much. I personally appreciate all the cooperation in putting this plan together that I've received from Game and Fish and from the Parks Commission. They've all been a lot of the Parks Commission and Game and Fish guys have been, and I think they're all guys, aren't they, on Game and Fish?
Pardon me, sir?
Is there any women fishermen?
Not on that commission, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I need to think about that. But the enthusiasm and the cooperation, especially from the guys from South Oklahoma City, a lot of them grew up knowing about that lake and fishing it when they were kids, as I did. When I was a kid, it was there. You got a little box, you can go out and put a quarter in it, and you could fish all day. And I never did figure out how they knew who put the quarters in and who didn't. So I fished out there quite a bit when I was a kid. But it's my understanding that we had a fish inventory taken. There's a way to mildly shock the fish to the surface so they can get some kind of...
We have done sampling there, and the population is very, very good, and there are some very large fish there, too.
One of the Game and Fish guys told me they shocked a 62-pound catfish to the surface.
That's correct.
So it's... And it does, since we're going to make the first phase of it fishing-oriented, two things it does. One, it kind of fits the vision that I've had, and I think most of the residents of that portion of southeast Oklahoma City have, that the way that development ought to occur, it ought to occur in more outdoor athletic fishing, that kind of hiking, those kind of opportunities, as opposed to the more urban parks where you have a big swimming pool and all that other stuff. I think that the people that live out in my part of town are excited about this kind of amenity. So the other thing, because it's fishing, is because that really opens up lots of opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be available to us to get funding support from from state wildlife people. There's fishing money, what do you call it, close to home. Is that what they call it?
Yes, sir. We would propose to the Game and Fish Commission at a later date that it be designated or requested to be designated as a close-to-home fishing area.
So there's funding there if you do that. So we're hoping to stretch that $700,000, which was in the 07 bond issue, which without the kind of things we're talking about would have primarily purchased a piece of land. If we'd have bought a quarter section someplace else and paid $3,000 an acre, which would be tough to buy out there for that price, but that would have taken well over half of the money available for this project. So by putting it on Water Trust land and getting the Water Trust to do all the cleanup work, because it had been a dump site, and so we're going to really be able to put a park on the ground for the money that was really just to purchase a park to be designated to be done sometime in the future. So I'm really excited about it. And you say the name is the result of the people that homesteaded it or a long-time resident?
It's a family name, yes, sir.
Okay.
And, of course, there will be opportunities for naming if Council and Park Board and Game and Fish choose.
Okay.
Your Honor, make a comment. I would encourage follow up on Councilman White's comments, keep this park as natural as possible and to limit, to the extent we can, reasonably, the participation kind of activities out there. I know the park we have in Ward 8, Bluff Creek Park, is a sort of a passive park. There's not a lot of activities there except hiking and walking, and the trail they built out there is really an impressive operation. And I think the city needs more of those kind of parks where that we just protect green, wild areas that without a lot of activities. So I think Councilman White had a great point, to keep this as natural as possible, fishing, walking, and that sort of thing, as opposed to a lot of activities there.
Well, we're fortunate right now, I think, to see, the area that I represent is always a little chagrined about how much money spent other places and how little of it they believe to be spent where they live. And this is a great opportunity to kind of quell some of that talk, because right now this park is going in at the same time the Draper Trail is actually being extended to Draper Lake out in that area, which is another example of the kind of activity that we're talking about. We're doing the burns around Draper to increase the wildlife habitat out there, make it more accommodating for the habitat. So a lot of things that are consistent with that idea that you move to the country for a reason that are going on there. It's part of my personal vision for the area, and I'm glad to see the park department and the game and fish people and all the trails people and all that doing all that to make it work.
Yes, this is on Water Trust property. Surprisingly enough, the Water Trust chairman was very cooperative in helping us get that put.
I bet he will. He probably wants to put that box full of quarters, though, back.
Right, we may do that.
New revenue stream.
Wendell, is fishing allowed currently out there?
It hasn't been encouraged, but I don't think the Water Trust has taken any action to prohibit it.
Well, after the discussion today, good luck on keeping people away.
Yes, sir, I understand.
People fish it all the time. I'm rarely there that there's not somebody fishing.
That's great.
Well, I assume Pete's quarters weren't well spent if it's still well stocked and the fish are doing well out there.
Well, I'm not sure how many quarters I put in. But I was there a lot when I was a kid, though.
Wendell, I assume this will all be bank fishing and dock fishing, that there's no boats allowed on the lake, or there won't be boats allowed on the lake?
It would be our recommendation that not be the case. We'll discuss that with Game and Fish Commission, and that'll come along with all the rules related to the use of the lake, but typically we don't have boating on lakes that size.
But it is larger, again, as he pointed out, than any of the other lakes. It would be possible. It's not absolutely impossible to use a very small boat, maybe not permit motors, but it is possible to do a little more with it because it's so much larger.
Game and Fish does occasionally recommend unmotorized boats for a fairly large lake.
Right. I can see people kayaking on it and doing some of that kind of stuff.
All right. Wendell, thank you. Good luck with this project.
Thank you all very much.
All right. Skip, item C.
Is someone from staff here the question I had is the size and on the hotel, and is this the same one that we had on the agenda a week ago?
The rezoning was just recently approved.
Right.
Yes.
So do you have any information as to how many stories or what the accommodations will be on the hotel itself?
I didn't bring that with me, but I can get that to you.
Okay. All right.
Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? Ready to vote? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item, I don't see a concurrence docket today. Nothing on there, huh, Francis? All right, so we move on to item 8. Items requiring a separate vote. Item 8A has already been deferred for 2 weeks. The new date for item 8A is March 6th. On to item 8B. It's a zoning case in Ward 2. The idea is to close Northwest 58th Street and a portion for North Military Avenue for commercial development. I think this has been before us several times before, and I think Councilman Shadid is aware it's on the agenda this morning. We have a motion? Any comments or questions on item 8B? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8C is an item that we've been discussing for the past few weeks. This is the final hearing, so today we will have the vote in place. We have a couple of people that have signed up to speak.
And Mayor, subsequent to the last council meeting, there were some people that spoke and had some questions and further concerns, and the police department, along with others, met with some of the people that were here last week and had a meeting on Thursday, and I sent you a memo out late last week describing the results of that meeting. And hopefully our police chief is around somewhere. I'm sure he's just around the corner.
Mayor, I had a question.
All right.
All right.
Should I call up the couple of people that have asked us to
Well,
speak?
Councilman, did you want to talk to council, to the chief city, or?
Well, I had a question in reference to response to time.
Yes.
On the ordinance as far as 24-hour on the taxi cab?
Yes.
Yes.
So
I mean, I can ask staff, or I can ask the chief, or I can ask you.
You can start with me, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Skip, what's the question?
Well, the question is I received several emails as it relates to the 24-hour ordinance. Is this going to apply to everyone, or is it just to the taxi cabs that on a 24-hour enforcement that they can't park even after the hours in which the meters are not regulated by the city, Chief?
That's correct. We talked about that, and of course the original intent was to try to keep the curb parking available for the public in general, and I think that if you don't enforce it after 6 o'clock, you still run the risk of, you may have a whole block that could be blocked off by the taxi cabs at any one point. So, I mean, that's a decision that has to be made, because we don't enforce them after 6 o'clock. General public does not have to pay for that. So, and that was one of the arguments that some of the taxi cab owners and drivers had when we had a meeting last week, that it would be enforced after 6. And I think it's our position that you really run the risk of, it's so competitive that you run the risk of maybe a lot of those areas being completely blocked off by taxi cabs where you want the public to be able to park. So that's kind of a policy decision of whether or not you want taxi cabs parking there or you want it left open for the general public.
Do we know approximately how many, well, I'm sure we should know, how many taxi cabs we have in the city now?
I'm not sure what the number, there's 7 or 8 different companies, but I'm not sure exactly how many cabs we have. But I know that
we can get that information. Some of the smaller cabs, companies only have a few, and some of the larger ones, I think, are in the 30s or maybe even 40s. So there's it's a blend. It's several hundred taxi cabs, I would guess, but I don't know that exactly.
I just know without regulations, I know the airport's had some significant problems with, kind of cab companies trying to monopolize areas and business, and I just, that's the risk you run into if you don't continue to do that at night. Again, I think I can't say for sure, but I think that there's a good possibility that a lot of those meters would be blocked off by cab companies if you did that. I mean, that's, I can't say that for sure, but I can see from the experience they've had both at the airport and some of the things we've seen downtown during the regular hours, that's a good possibility. And so if you want the meters left open for the general public in the evenings, then you would have to continue to restrict that.
Chief, the result of your meeting with the taxi cab owners was to increase the number of slots available, even particularly during the construction phase downtown, that we would add additional taxi stands.
That's correct. I think one of the legitimate concerns that they had that we discussed was, one, during the construction, that there's probably about 6 of their taxi cab stand areas that were being, weren't available as a result of the construction. Now, that's temporary, but we don't know how long. The second thing is to be able to hood during special events. If you may have a conference come in, I think that's a legitimate concern, being able to have enough enough area for them to park, and possibly changing the ordinance, and legal's looking at that, some councilors are looking at that, possibly hood and make available on a temporary basis during those times more spaces. And I think those are legitimate issues that we're looking at. Now, what we've done is we've identified about 3 or 4 additional slots on Robinson while the construction is going on. There on Robinson between Sheridan and Main on the east side of the street. And in the meeting that we had, that seemed to make the cab drivers and companies pretty happy with the alternative until the construction's done.
Chief, just a comment that, and I appreciate your willingness to continue to look at this as situations develop that may suggest or require some kind of a modification, at least on a temporary basis. And I would say, both to you and to the members of that industry, that as long as everybody's continuing to work together, I think the council would support any modifications over the next months until, especially as we get worked through all of this construction. And so I appreciate your efforts to be flexible, but yet still have some basic guidelines for everyone to work with. So thank you.
When you have the covered meters where I've noticed that sometimes you have entertainers that come in or large conferences, and they have these buses, and the meters are blocked off from the general public, and so those buses have priority parking. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, the meters are blocked off for, like, you're talking about like the Civic Center where you may have a group come in, the buses park, and the meters are blocked off.
Well, even over on Robinson in the area where the hotels are,
right.
I mean, it's been noticed that there's a lot of times where the meters are covered, and it seems like that the only people who are allowed to park there are the buses, because that's the only ones I ever see parked there. So under the ordinance, that's not going to have any effect on them, so they can still park and have, is that by some application that they submit earlier to be able to have privileged parking?
Well, the ordinance is going to have to be rewritten to allow the taxi cabs to park, for us to hood the meters for the taxi cab company specifically. And so municipal councils are looking at that and what the changes need to be made that need to come before you to allow that to happen. Because right now, the ordinance does not accommodate that. So, but we explained to the cab companies that we are going to look at that and try, because it is a legitimate reason to me to hood those meters. Say if a large conference comes in and those taxi cabs are needed, say close to the Cox Center. So we'll have to change the ordinance to do that because the current ordinance does not accommodate that.
I believe, and I won't say all the time, but I believe most of the time that a meter is hooded for a private individual or a private event that's going on or something. They're charged a fee based on what the daily revenue might have been with that meter or something. They don't just get them hooded for nothing. At least the ones that I've had experience with, if you reserve it for an event of some kind and hood it for people, there is a fee that goes along with that, so they don't get them for free.
Thanks, Councilman Mars. That brought up another question. Is it then possible that after a certain period of, when we stop regulating the enforcement of the meters to the general public, could there be a fee that you could hood the meters for the taxi cab drivers for a particular area, and they would pay in accordance to what the other private companies pay?
I guess that would possibly be feasible, but you're still, the purpose of the ordinance is to allow parking for the public that come downtown to events and those types of things, not for business purposes. So, we try to identify enough parking spaces for taxi cabs so that they can provide their business. Besides, and like the owner of the Thunder Cab had stated, in most cases, when you have a lot of business and conferences, they're on the move anyway late at night. They won't even stop. I mean, they'll continue to move through the streets and pick up fares in most cases. So, you know, it's not really even, it's not, I don't know that it'd be something they would be interested in. I guess it's something we could look at. That's always a possibility. But again, you're taking away that parking, if you do that, from the general public to be able to park downtown during special events and those types of things. So it just depends on what, you know, what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Chief.
We have a couple of people that have signed up to speak on the issue. Wes Preble. Wes, we'll need your name and address for the record, please.
Wes Preble, 8901 Northwest 83rd, Oklahoma City. Mr. Mayor, Council, I appreciate you giving me the time again today to talk to you before this. Also want to thank the police chief and everyone that was at the meeting on Thursday. Just being a driver, and these are, my opinions don't reflect any company's opinions or anything like that, just mine. It was good to see the city working together on this. The two concerns that I have with this still is the 24-hour parking issue. Kind of using another argument that has been presented about, you know, taxi cabs are our personal vehicles as well. And if I'm taking my wife downtown to the Spaghetti Warehouse and I'm driving by and there happens to be a parking spot right in front of the Spaghetti Warehouse that's metered as a taxi cab, I cannot park there. And I just, you know, I feel like it's a great idea during business hours. I think it's wonderful. But during the evening hours, I just don't see the point for that. The other issue that I don't think really has been discussed, but we also need to look at is shuttles and limousines as well, are all vehicle for hire vehicles. Again, it's a competitive business, and I think if you just restrict it to allowing the shuttles and or the limousines to park at parking meter space and not the taxi cabs, kind of creates an unfair advantage for the taxi cab issue. Again, I think this is a great idea. Mentioned last week, with all the construction going on, I just think the timing is wrong. I would recommend and hope that you pass a continuance on this for 6 months. Let the construction happen. Let our existing cab stands open up. Let the new cab stands open up, and then come back and take a look at the issues and maybe tweak any issues that come. I think if you make a decision now based on the facts that we don't know what it's going to be like after the construction is completed, I think that's kind of not forward thinking. That's my opinion. Thank you.
All right. Wes, thanks for coming down. Tanya Valencia.
Tawana Valencia, 3511 Charleston Road, owner A1 Taxi. I didn't notice the wording. I had to pull up my other, but there's a couple of things I actually have a big issue about in here. One is the fact that it only mentions buses and taxis in the second part, which it should state all vehicles for hire. If one division of a vehicle for hire can't do it, none should be able to. So the limo shouldn't be able to do it. The shuttles shouldn't be able to do it. Anything that picks up passengers and charges them to take them to a location should not be able to do it. Yet it just specifically points out taxis here in the Bricktown Core Development and Downtown Business District. So we're the only ones that are excluded from that. What about the other vehicles for hire? So they're allowed to do it? Secondly, up here in Article 32, right before that, it says stopping or parking of taxis. As the owner of Thunder Cab stated that they circle around. That's not true for all. Some circle, some park. The ones that circle because there's no place to park. But it says stopping or parking. Well, if we can't stop to load the passenger and we can't park for them to walk to us, I'm not quite sure how we're going to load them unless they get a run and start and we open the door. So, just the wording of that concerns me because it allows us no way to stop and pick up that customer. And then up on the top part, where it says parking of buses and taxi cabs, there again, buses and taxi cabs, it doesn't say anything about the shuttles, the limos, and the other various means that people are picked up. I just think the wording of this is just not worded specifically enough for, or maybe too specifically, since it only points out taxis and not the other forms. Mr. Mayor, as you know, I was privileged to be on the taxi task force when we decided that we needed more taxi cabs in Oklahoma City, and we did, and we're getting them. We now have like 4 more companies than we did at the time. But as you also know, we also stated at that time that once these companies came in, we were going to have to relook at provisions, especially in the downtown area, for all these taxi cabs. And I think the time has come that, you know, maybe we could get a few of us together that would work on long-term answers to these problems.
What suggestions might you have, Tanya, for trying to resolve our issue of trying to make sure that people have a place to park when they come downtown and still allow you all to do business?
Right. Well, that's a major issue. At this point, I'm not sure I know what the answer is. I just know it needs looked into. With the construction going on, it's hard to make an informed decision. I circled and circled and circled this town the other day trying to find a solution to this, looking at different areas and stuff and how we could solve this. And with all this construction, like I said, it's hard to know what is this going to be like when it all clears. So I do agree that anything that is set forth today needs to be a temporary until, you know, this is all completed and we can actually make an informed decision. It's hard to make an informed decision when you don't have good facts, and right now there's just not enough good facts out there to form a good opinion on what we should do. But in the meantime, if only taxis are banned from these things, I believe that to be a serious misjustice. I mean, we're trying to do a service for the city too. Just like in April when prepaid legal comes, and you have thousands of people come in on this town. Right now, there's 8 parking spaces. And I love the meeting that we had. I think we are all trying to work together. But as, sorry, I can't remember your name, the lady in red stated, this isn't something that can happen overnight. It's going to have to be relooked at and reworded. So in April, we're going to have just 8 taxi spots to service thousands of people and all the taxis that are going to be down here, because that's where it's happening at right now. So I just think that along with temporary solutions, we're also going to need some long-term solutions, maybe several of us putting our minds together and seeing what we could come up with. I would love if we could maybe do that, which goes along with what we talked about in the beginning when we first opened up to make it easier for taxis to come in down here.
Appreciate you coming down.
Thank
Thanks. You. Chief, I had a couple of questions on this one. Where are the specific trouble spots?
Well, probably my staff could answer that better than I could. Ed, you want you to come up here, and since he deals with it, they deal with it on a daily basis, and I'll let them, they'll do a much better job at it than I will.
Good morning. Most of our complaints in regards to taxis and the number of taxis that are parked in that area occur on Main Street there between Broadway and Robinson. There's a taxi stand there, and then we also have complaints about the taxi cabs over in the Bricktown area parking in close proximity to some of the restaurants, some of the businesses there that take up spaces that are more intended for the short term for the customers and clients that come in and out of those businesses and those restaurants, eateries and such. As part of this process, we met with cab companies last summer. We added and increased the number of taxi cab stands over in the Bricktown area, added a couple just north of the Hampton. We added several taxi cab stands over near the Skirvin. There are a couple of their stands that have been closed due to street construction on Sheridan, just west of the Devon Tower, and then also the taxi stand over on Sheridan just on the north side of the Cox Center is currently closed due to the latest construction project there. proposed was to, the cab companies wanted to expand the taxi stand that's existing at Main and Broadway, increase it from 3 or 4 to basically taking up the whole south side of that block there between Main and Robinson, allowing taxis to park there. Our counter proposal that seemed to meet with their satisfaction last week was to add stands on Robinson there, northbound on Robinson, as the chief indicated, between Sheridan and Main Street.
Okay.
Additionally, to add additional capacity for cabs in the evening hours, this ordinance changes the hours for the carriage loading zones and lets those be kind of a dual-purpose zones after the carriages leave in the evenings to allow taxis to increase their presence around some of the areas in Bricktown.
Okay. Chief, have we looked at how other cities deal with the different types of transportation that people can hire? In other words, the limos, everything out there, the shuttles.
Right.
Is our new ordinance reflective of what other cities do?
I'm not sure if we've compared the ordinances, but you have to remember that in most cases, those limos, and what she's talking about is providing those stands. We've never provided stands for those because most of those are rented. They're, so they pull up to the hotel, they may go to the home. They don't wait like cabs do for the fares to walk out and then find their customers that way. So we accommodate them like during the special events over at the Chesapeake Center and in those areas, and provide places for them to pull in, to unload, and to pick up their customers. But again, they're not waiting for that fare. So there's never really been a need to provide a limousine stand, so to speak, for for one of those types of companies. The language that you see in the ordinance is exactly the same as it always has been, with the exception that what's been added is not allowing them to park at meters. All that other language is the same and has been that way for quite some time, and we haven't had an issue with cabs being able to pick up and drop off customers. We allow them, they may even double park and pick up and drop off. People do it downtown. In some cases, if they're not really blocking the flow of traffic, you have to give some leeway, some discretion to allow that to happen, because there are busy times and all the parking in the areas don't accommodate all the traffic. So, PST, the parking attendants and officers do provide some discretion in that regard, and there really hasn't been an issue of them being able to stop temporarily to meter or to drop off a person or pick somebody up if they're, if that's what they're doing. It's just not an issue, hadn't been an issue.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the industry working with us. We know this is an ever-growing business in Oklahoma City, and Twania was mentioning the additional taxi cab companies that have come in, and we're all learning at the same time. So I know you guys have been trying to work with them and try to have a lot of public debate during this process. Any other comments or questions from council? Yeah, David.
Mayor, I do appreciate the comments that the two speakers brought forth today, and I would encourage that we could keep a dialogue going with them, maybe on a regularly scheduled basis, a meeting each month. And after a month, if you find these new ordinances problematic, please come back. Well, try to work out a resolution with the chief or the appropriate people, but if you feel like it can't be worked out, then always come back to us and let us know if there is a problem. Could you ever work out an arrangement with the parking lots where the cabs could stage, hold up in a parking lot, and then as a space became available at the taxi cab stand, you could replace that cab that just picked up a fare? Can you think of other solutions possibly to help us work through this situation?
We can look at all those options, and we'll continue to meet with them to do so. If it was a private parking lot, yes, I would assume they'd have to work out a lease agreement with the owner of the lot to do that, I would assume.
Well, and I'm encouraged that Wes thinks the construction is going to be completed in 6 months, so we need to put him in charge of some of this stuff.
All right.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion on item 8C? All right. Any additional comments or questions before we vote? All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Thank you all. On item 8D, it's a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. We have one person that has signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who would like to speak today on any item listed under 8D? All right. Muhammad Tai?
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Muhammad, I will need your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Muhammad Tai, and my residential address is 4641 West Nicholas Avenue, apartment C, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73132. And my phone number is 405-996-9026. And I am here to represent myself for the property 3025 Northeast 15th Street in Ward 7, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
All right. Councilman Kelly, I'm sure, can help guide us through this issue. Muhammad, you own the property?
Yes, sir, I own the property. Yes, sir.
Okay.
What are the plans that you have for the property now?
Sir, I was already in a process of asking the bids for the repair of this property and rent it. I see what the gentleman is showing the pictures. These are the is a inbuilt mechanism of our society that if any properties sit vacant for some time, then people try to vandalize it and try to break it and try to steal the stuff out of it. And that's what happened, while I was trying to fix this property. But I was in the process of talking to the renovation people who are going to renovate it and fix it and get it to rent again. And I request the council to provide me sufficient time to do that, where I can fix it and rent it for a purposeful reason and for a benefit of the community and to me also.
So, is it under a contract with?
It is not. I was talking to the renovation company, and while I received this citation, and they told me to wait till I have the hearing, and once after the hearing, I can start the process.
But you say you were talking to the demolition company?
No, renovation. Renovation company,
okay.
Yes, sir.
I understand a lot of the problems that property owners have in reference to properties that they don't reside in, that they're purchasing for investment purposes or rental purposes. And yes, it is a problem in reference to some of the infrastructure of some of these properties being removed by people when there's no one living there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's conditions as it relates to this property that's from the outside that clearly has nothing to do with the plumbing being removed or the electrical wiring being removed.
Well, sir, I'm sorry to
Staff, how much time have he had in reference to the notice that you all gave him to respond?
Well, this particular one is just before council now, so he's had a few weeks. Unfortunately, we've issued him over the last several months to years several property maintenance citations that he has not addressed.
Is it on the same property?
Yes, sir.
Who was the last time someone lived in this property?
Well, it was in 2010. Beginning of 2010. And then, it was vacated at that time, and the people, while I was trying to fix it, people vandalized the property and they took away the copper wire under, in the house, and the copper pipe, the plumbings from the house. So at that time, it was kind of little difficult to come up with the expenses at that time for me, so I was kind of waiting. But now I'm in a position to do that, and I'm trying to fix it and, rent it.
How much time do you need to get the renovations done for
well, I would say,
satisfactory with
I would say, having the bid and start the process and it all complete, probably I would say 90 days at the most. And that's a reasonable time, during which time we will board the property and we start fixing it and, get it to the rentable condition and rent it.
if he shows you some good compliance and good faith in reference to some major correctness of this property within the next 30 to 45 days, is that something that we could?
Yes, that's pretty standard for anybody that'll show up. They have 30 days in which to start compliance. He mentioned that he's been in connection with a couple of companies to do renovations. All we need is probably those contracts in place that are signed, and we can monitor it, and we'll try to work with him.
So Mohammed,
Yes.
could you please give Mr. Charles the plans and the name of the company that you have contracted with in order to do this renovation? We don't want to take your property. We don't want to do anything that's going to be adverse to you and as far as our owner. But, you know, some of these properties, they just become a continued eyesore and deflates the value of our communities. And this is one of the issues that we talked about earlier as far as abandoned properties.
That's
So
true.
it looks abandoned. The conditions of it, obviously, just from these pictures, looks deplorable. But if you say that you have the intentions and you want to do the right thing, then Mr. Locke will work with you. But you've got to be, you know, diligent in reference to the timing of getting the information to them. Otherwise, it comes back to us, and at that point in time, we won't have any choice but to do what staff has recommended, okay?
Well, that would be excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that very much.
Okay,
You know. So I would be in touch with Mr. Your name?
Mr. Locke.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a blessed day. Thank you.
Mayor.
So we'll leave it on?
Yes.
Mayor, can I ask a question, not about this one? I normally get by and look at the dilapidated structures in my area. I did not get by and look at the one on this one. And it's at 524. It's CDC. Would you mind showing the pictures of it? Just so I can see it. What's the history on it, Charles, in terms of...
Well, it's been in this condition for a fairly lengthy period of time. As you can tell, it looks like actually the trees are holding one of the walls up, probably that keeps it upright. It is in danger of collapse.
I see this same owner has a property on the unsecured side of it for a seller on the same piece of property. It's okay, you can leave it on, but there's no one here to talk about it. I usually get by and look at them on the
We haven't had any contact from them on this.
Thank you.
All right, ready to go on the dilapidated list? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8E is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. We have one person that has signed up to speak. Anyone else wishing to speak under any item listed under 8E? All right, Roberta Roberts.
My name is Roberta Roberts, and I'm in behalf of my granddaughter, who is now working in Colorado, but is paying for the house and is wanting to totally restore it. It is in a historical area. What we have done is try to work on the house as funds is available, and I know that's not always as fast as we would like.
Let me draw the council's attention. You're referring to the property at 2832 Northwest 45th Street?
Yes, sir.
In Ward 2, okay. Can we draw the pictures up on that so we can see it? Okay, well, the pictures kind of illustrate the problem that we're facing. You understand that the problem is not secured.
Well, it has been since, exactly what happened is one of the contractors working had left the crawl space unsecured,
whereas someone was able to get into the house.
Is the house secured today as far as you know?
Yes, it is. Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Charles, you want to continue to work with her then?
Yes, well,
Okay, we don't want to have to do anything to this house, but here's what we'll do, Roberta. If you'll keep working with Charles, we're going to leave it on the list. They'll go back out and look at it.
Okay.
And if it's secured, then we won't take any action going forward.
Okay, well...
All right?
we-
But you should get Charles's business card so you can stay in touch with him just to make sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Thank you
Thanks for
very
coming
much.
down. Anyone else wishing to speak under an item listed under 8E for unsecured structures? All right. How about a motion? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On item 8F, we have a series of right-of-way use permits that have been requested. The first is for the Western Avenue Block Party. And looks like we have a person that has signed up to speak, Carney Hewlett.
My name's Carrie Hewlett, and if you had any questions, I'm here to answer them, or if you want me to tell you what this is
Yeah,
about.
why don't you pull the microphone closer, and we'll need your name and address for the record.
Okay, it's Carrie Hewlett. My address is 4670 North Willard Avenue in Oklahoma City.
Well, why don't you use this opportunity to tell us about the Western Avenue Block Party, if you don't mind.
We have a party in March that we're asking that the block be closed down for a couple hours on a Sunday afternoon. We have a number of activities. At Beck's Automotive, there's a car show. In the VZD's parking lot, there are a lot of kids' activities, entertainment, and then head shaving to support, to raise money for St. Baldrick's, which is a foundation to provide research funds for pediatric cancer. This will be our 10th year, 9 years at this location.
All right. Well, Carrie, thanks for your continued work in this specific area. I know the merchants over there appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down and telling us about it.
Okay.
How about a motion on that item? We're voting on item 8F1. Anybody else want to have a question or comment about it? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8F2 is for the Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon, which will be held throughout Oklahoma City on April 29th. And looks like John Holsey has come down to speak. John, come on forward.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'll need your name and address for the record, John.
John Holsey, 4141 Northwest Expressway, Oklahoma City.
How many people are you going to have this year?
Well, last year we had 26,000. This year we're running 30% ahead of last year on registrations.
My goodness.
So it's going to be really big this year. It's
That is
pretty
fabulous.
exciting time.
Congratulations on that.
Last year, we managed to give a check to the memorial for $850,000. This year, I expect it to be significantly larger than that. I really want to express my thanks to the city for the support. I know it's very much an inconvenience for a lot of the citizens here on that day, but it really is a really good cause, and this city has really helped support this thing. I do also have some special thanks I'd like to give to Stuart Chai in the traffic department and all those people that he works with. He's been absolutely awesome. Major Hill with the police department also, and downtown OKC. Without all that help, we wouldn't be able to pull this off.
Well, John, we appreciate your work, and I know you have a lot of volunteers that put a lot of time into
We
this.
do.
The city is better for your work. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, how about a motion on the marathon? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Your Honor, before we move this, I'd like to mention the fact that we need to give the citizens as much warning as we possibly can on these streets that are going to be blocked off. We've had some issues with that before, and the bike route particularly is very extensive. It goes up around Lake Hefner, and we just need to let people know that there's going to be a slight inconvenience for this event, and I think it's a great event, and people will put up with it if they know in advance where they're going to be denied access.
Good point. On to item 8.3, and that's to hold Live on the Plaza, which is a monthly event, and they've asked for several months to be represented here. Is there anyone here from the Plaza District? Okay. I'll speak on behalf of the Plaza District there. I've gone to this event several times, and it is quite enjoyable. It's really nice. They're asking for April 13th, May 11th, June 8th, July 13th, August 10th, September 14th, October 12th. And I think it's the second Friday of each month, if you didn't write all those dates down. But a great event. How about a motion on Live on the Plaza? And cast your votes. Passed unanimously. On to item 8G, I understand we do not need executive session today?
That's correct.
All right. How about a motion then? Strike the item. Make it official. Move on to item 8H. These are claims recommended for denial. We have 3 items listed here. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8H? Just been handed a couple here. Okay. Linda Atwood. Linda, would you come forward? Good morning.
Thank you. I'm Linda Atwood, and my address is 8901 MacArthur Terrace. And I'm sorry I'm hoarse today. On November the 6th, in the famous rainstorm, our house flooded with sewer. And there were so many things that happened that night. First of all, I don't know how to start, but anyway, there was like 12 inches of water flowing through the house. And then my plumber was there to help me to leave because I needed to evacuate. And he said he never had seen such a mess out there because the city was there and they were trying to pop the manhole cover and they couldn't do it. So the water continued in. So anyway, the house was completely destroyed by sewer water. So anyway, everything went on, but there's some more information about it because there's some pictures we turned in about the damage. It's really hard to explain how you can see things flowing in your house and you're losing things. And then I called Farmers Insurance, and then the next morning, the adjuster agreed to being out there. He says, no, it's the city's fault. It's the city line that ruptured, and that's why we had sewer in our house. So anyway, we had, on one hand, we had the Farmers Insurance people there. Then the city people came, and they offered to clean it up. And then we had Phoenix Restoration was there. But the 3 men from the CAPS program, I believe, is called Micah is the supervisor. I said, what am I to do? I mean, the Farmers Insurance is denying the claim. They're not going to pay. They told me they would last night. My house is completely destroyed. It was awful. And they said, well, they could go in and take care of it, but they couldn't clean it for us because it's catastrophic. And my neighbor was involved with it. And so I just feel that this claim was denied unwrongly. I really do, because the line, it was so much water pouring into your house, and then black sewer. I don't know if anybody's had this happen to them. It was horrible. So we out at the expense. I lost 3 antique quilts because I had them hanging on those were things. But I was able to get out. But then a lot of things I did learn. You don't put your shoes on the floor because they float down the hallway. Anytime there's anything, you want to put them in the middle of the closet. So ladies, put your shoes in the middle of the closet. I've learned that. But can Ryan from Phoenix Restoration talk for us? Can he talk? He has pictures and stuff. He's here to help us.
Yeah, bring him on.
Come on. Right. Because I can't talk more. But it's, and then also, I was able to get out of the house with some information on MacArthur Terrace, and I have 2 receipts, but they're dated 1/7/203 from Ray's Sewer Service that we had sewer problems with the city line. We've always had trouble with the sewer line there, always. And of course, that's not within the 5 years. Then I also have one from January the 5th, 96, the same thing. But are you supposed to, every time you see a city employee, are you supposed to go and get a receipt from them that they're cleaning your street or your lines? I don't understand.
Yeah. Well,
I really don't understand
this issue
why.
frequently frustrates us as well. Let's go ahead and hear from from the person you've asked to come forward and see what he has to add.
I mean, it was just catastrophic. It was, I can't explain.
We're not questioning the severity of what happened. I think what we're ultimately going to have to determine, though, is our discretionary ability to address it for you. But let's hear what he has to say.
My name is Ryan McGann. I was with Phoenix Restoration at the time. I'm no longer currently employed with them. I started my own restoration company. I guess the issue is where the liability rests.
Right.
From based in the claims department, it was denied because the collapse on the property prior to that, the sewer line had collapsed, causing it to back up into Linda's house. But I'm not really for certain how that could cause the city sewer line to back up into her house if the I'm trying to explain this. The only way this could have backed up into Linda's house is if the city sewer line had been clogged. And that's really the only issue there. Whether it was involved from tree limbs or...
The issue for us in this body is a little more complicated than that because state law restricts what claims municipalities can pay and which ones they do not pay. Mm-hmm. And so we have to follow state law in this regard. But let me bring up our legal staff and see what sort of discretionary abilities we may have to deal with it. The council has shown a history of being very sympathetic and paying when we can. But as I mentioned earlier, we can't always pay due to state law that restricts municipalities' ability to handle these discretionary items. So what can you tell us about this?
Good morning, Amy Cronk, Municipal Counselor's Office. City records show that we do not have any prior notice of any problems on the city sewer line in the 5 years prior to this incident. And I know that I spoke with Ms. Atwood and the gentleman from Phoenix Restoration when this first came about and tried to explain to them the legal
The 5-year stipulation, is that our policy or is that part of the state law?
That's how far our records go back, I believe. We check our records as far back as we have them.
Okay.
Yeah, there was flooding, okay, that night. Okay, my neighbor's house flooded first, then, of course, and then mine flooded, then our neighbor's flooded, but he didn't file a claim. The neighbor against them, they have no household insurance, so they didn't file a claim. So then you go on up the street, clear up to 86th and MacArthur, they had flooding. And they didn't file a claim because they don't have any household insurance, which so it's not. And then Hefner Junior High is right on past there, and they've historically had problems. These lines are all connected, so how can, I understand the laws and everything, but I don't think it's right that we're penalized, because we had such a terrible summer and drought, and this happened. First there was a big rainstorm, then we had an earthquake, and within 30 minutes, we had flood in our house. So I do think all these events, well, that line was not maintained. And the next morning, it was like, there were so many city people out there. On that night, our streets were there were so many people there from the city. And my plumber will tell you, he went out there trying to help him to pop wherever the drain was, and they wouldn't let him help him. And he came in and he says, I've never seen such a disaster. He said, you need to evacuate, which I did. He helped me get a few things out, and I went to a motel. But I just don't think it's,
I understand your point, Linda.
I guess the question we'd like to ask is, why did the city sewer line back up? What was the result of the city sewer line backing up?
Hi, I'm Marcia Slaughter. I'm the Utilities Director. I'm responsible for water, sewer, and trash. The line backed up because the house connection at 8905 fell into the sewer. That's the cause of the backup. It wasn't an overload. It wasn't like a maintenance. It was a private connection falling into the sewer. It collapsed into the sewer.
So this is an adjacent property?
Yeah. But how could that cause every house on the block to flood? The sewer.
Because I understand.
Sewer.
It's a very, very unfortunate situation. It doesn't happen that often, but the downstream private sewer connection fell into the line and blocked any passage. So the sewage has no place to go, so it backs upstream until it has its first place to...
Where did the water come from?
It comes from upstream.
The brown water. I had brown water. Well, okay, my neighbor's house is where they're saying that it collapsed. But it was brown water first, and then the sewer. I had 1.5 feet of water, muddy water that I walked in until, then I saw the black sewer coming in.
Linda, I assure you, we're not trying to get out of paying, but we have to be able to legally pay it before we can address it, and this is a...
But I just don't believe it was caused by my neighbors. And yeah, I just don't believe that. I believe it was not maintained, because we've always had trouble. But I have, are we supposed to go and ask the city employees what they're doing every time they're out there?
No, usually the only advice that we can allow people is to have insurance against sewer backup.
Well, that's not, we can't get it.
Yeah, I understand.
Farmers insurance, it says we don't have the sewer backup clause. I was forced to move to Houston to live with my daughter, and so I've got car insurance there. And he told me he couldn't even offer sewer backup. So you're telling us there's sewer backup, and then the insurance is saying they can't cover. Something's wrong.
No, what we're telling you is we're restricted by state law. That we would be found liable if we paid it. We have complained at the state level that we'd like some discretion on some of these items and asked for changes, and we have not been able to.
Well, these receipts are the only ones I didn't get out with anything except these 2 receipts. So they're from 96 and 2003. So I guess we're screwed.
Thanks for coming down. We're sorry for your issue. Yes.
Good morning, Council. My name is Mark Folger. My work address is 211 North Robinson, 2 Leadership Square, and I represent Gay Griffin, who is seated back here next to Ms. Atwood. Ms. Griffin's house is next door to the north of Ms. Atwood's house. And the claim denial recommendation letters that were sent to both of these ladies state that the cause of the backup was when the connection at Ms. Griffin's residence entered, that's the word, entered the city sewer line, and that's what Ms. Cronk and, I can't remember your name, Ms. Slaughter were just explaining, and that the entry of the private line into the city line is the cause of this particular backup. We understand that the city's got a job to do, and they do a great job, and that it can only pay claims that it's legally liable for. That's a good policy. So the question is, what is it legally liable for? And it's in severe cases like this that just in 2 of the houses, and remember, there were many more houses south from Ms. Griffin's house that were damaged. 2 of the houses are here today. We're talking about $250,000 worth of damage. It's in cases like these that people start getting uncomfortable, and maybe we need to look at the legal standard. The extent of the damage in Ms. Griffin's house is that water and raw sewage entered the house and was several inches up the wall and furniture, such that literally everything in the house was ruined. Ms. Griffin is still not living in her home. Ms. Atwood's not living in her home. She's living in Texas. Ms. Griffin was told by State Farm specifically that her homeowner's policy would not cover this because it occurred on the city line, not on her private line. The explanation we get from the folks at the city is that Ms. Griffin's line entered the city line. My question is, how can that be Ms. Griffin's problem? It could have been a corroded city line. It could have been a clog in the city line that caught. I don't see how, or anyone can see how a private line enters a city line without there being a problem with the city line. And there might be an expert here to talk about that, and that'd be great. We should hear about that. I submit that several claims in the past get this same explanation. The private line at X address entered the city line, causing the backup. I'm just concerned that actually is a city problem. It's being applied. The standard is being applied as a private problem, but this private problem, and every time this private problem happens, apparently affects a lot of people. Seems like a city line problem. The second problem worth talking about is the legal standard. Mayor Cornett, when you refer to state law, What's cited in the claim denials is a case, it's an Oklahoma Supreme Court case, the Romano case, and it has cited the Holdenville versus Moore case. And I'd like to read this standard from the case.
Okay.
Here's the legal standard for negligence and or nuisance with respect to sewer problems. Quote, when a municipal corporation assumes the control and management of a sewer system which has been constructed by it and under its supervision, it is bound to use reasonable diligence and care to see that such sewer is not clogged with refuse and is liable for negligence in the performance of such duty. Stop there. You've been given a legal standard for a duty. The city has a duty to reasonably maintain the lines. What does that entail? Not sure we know. Probably some routine maintenance. That's what I would submit. The standard continues, the last part of the sentence, to a property owner injured thereby after reasonable notice of the clogged condition of such sewer. What's reasonable notice is what's important here. How it's been applied in the past, traditionally, is that, I guess because the records go back 5 years, you look at the maintenance records from Ms. Slaughter's department, and then you check for a line segment, which I believe I've been told covers manhole to manhole. That's not very far. And then there's also an action line that citizens can call, and phone records are checked for the action line, but that only pertains to a particular house. So in this case, Ms. Griffin's hadn't called the action line in 5 years, and there hadn't been any problems reported in the one set of records that they're looking at for 5 years prior in this line segment. I would submit that the line segment, that this legal standard that I just read to you is a broad legal standard. It's being applied very narrowly. And in this case, it very well could be that the city had reasonable notice. Ms. Atwood has talked about problems down the street at the Hefner Middle School. I can't remember what it's called now, Hefner Mid-High or Junior High or Middle School, but and all the way up the street, there is history of problems on the line, but where do you draw the line, segment to segment? And there's nothing in the case law or statute that speaks to 5 years. That's just because apparently your records go back 5 years. There could be plumbing records, there could have been calls, there could have been letters written. There's just that we haven't been able to discover such information. So the point is there could be further investigation here factually, and even as the legal standards been applied to date, they might have satisfied it, and we would request that the claim be accepted or affirmed, or at least, at a minimum, take some more time to find out if, A, this is really a city line problem, and B, whether there really was adequate notice under the law. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming down. Kenny, do you want to direct in all the things that you've heard here this morning that on this issue and the case law that's been submitted?
Yes. It's after reasonable notice to the municipality of the clogged condition, and we had no notice of the clogged condition. We went out and addressed it at that point. And I don't think that there's no evidence that has been presented to us that would make the city liable for this. And also, if the council denies the claim, they can go over to court and possibly get a jury to make a determination on it.
Okay. Any of the members of the council want to speak on this item? I sense a sympathy from each of you, and each one of you has had residents in your own wards who have had similar issues in the past. I grew up at a home that flooded in this exact situation 2 or 3 times a year, and I can remember, my parents having to deal with the tremendous issues that come with this type of situation. So we're as sympathetic as possible, but you have to understand that there is a legal standard here that allows this council to pay some claims and not pay other claims. And based on the legal advice that's being presented to the council, we're not able to pay this claim from a legal standpoint. And that's at the end of the line for us. So this item is still on here, and I'm assuming we're going to get a motion and go forward on it. All right, cast your votes. Those claims are denied. We're on to item 9. It's claims recommended for approval. We have one item listed. All right. Comments or questions on item 9? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 10 is items from council, and we start with one that's been presented by Councilman Shadid. Councilman White, did you have a conversation with Councilman Shadid about this issue?
Prefers that we go forward with it. Basically what he's asking is that when we used fund balance to resurface streets, that fund balance portion that was allocated for Ward 2 be applied to fix this problem that has occurred on Western. It actually relates to the item that we had back on item 8B, I believe, today, because one of the commitments that was made during that process with those neighborhoods that are immediately east of the Classen Curve area was that the city would do certain things to fix traffic congestions. This is the result of a traffic study that was had that says that this is the fix for that. And what he's asking is that the money that would have been used for street resurfacing be used for this purpose. It doesn't, because we did the street resurfacing with a resolution, it requires a resolution to reallocate the money. I don't know whether any of us, I know that I changed the specific resurfacing in my ward. I met with the Public Works and decided that that I had a priority that was higher than the one that they selected, and I changed it somewhat. And so I don't know whether anyone else did that or not. But it doesn't seem like to me that it's much different than that. This is a street project that's affecting Ward 2 that a commitment has been made that at some point in time when funds are available will be fixed, and he's just asking that it be done out of the street resurfacing. So I'm going to move its approval.
Okay.
You want to get a second?
Yeah, sure. Is there a second on this? Okay.
If I could fill in a little bit of the details, obviously, I think you know about the street closures. Most of you know about that. The traffic study looked at a 35-year horizon as to improvements that needed to be made, and there's a phase 1 improvements that the city is going to do short term, and those are to put a no turn on red on southbound on Grand Avenue. We're removing some curb for exit only on Northwest 53rd Street. The traffic signals on Western Avenue from 44th to 63rd, we're going to install new controllers, which has been completed at this point in time, which is about $45,000, and we're going to retime the controllers to assist in that process. Also, the phase 2 portion of this is there is a 07 GO bond program to do Western streetscape project south of 63rd on Western. And so as a part of that, we've got $1.7 million worth of improvements down there, and that includes signal lights at Lombardi Street and 55th Street, new sidewalks with landscaping, and resurfacing of Western Avenue, or the general scope. The traffic study recommends in phase 3 things, and again, we're talking about a horizon until 35, and it's several $1 million worth of potential improvements that need to be done. If this $1 million were to be transferred, that $1 million could be incorporated into that streetscape project, and then there would be construction of a left turn lane, continuous left turn lane from 53rd Street to Grand Boulevard, and widening at Northwestern and Grand to include a west turn lane and a westbound right turn lane with 2 through lanes, and the total cost of those improvements are about $915,000. That would be covered by Councilman Shadid's resolution, and then that would be constructed as incorporated with the Western Avenue streetscape projects that were funded and are funded as part of an 07 GO bond issue. So there's, I know I said a lot there, and I threw out some addresses, but the bottom line is there are some short-term improvements that we've committed to that we're either in the process of doing or have been done already. There's a phase 2 that we were going to do with the 07 bond issue project, that streetscape project along Western Avenue. And then there's a number of phase 3 recommendations that came out of the traffic study. Now, those could be done under future bond issue studies, or what Councilman Shadid is requesting, that we take $1 million out of this resurfacing, push that over into this project, and incorporate at least a portion of those improvements, primarily a continuous left turn lane, when we do the streetscape projects that will be done with the 07 bond issue.
Your Honor, I'd like to say a word or two. First of all, I'd like to make it clear I've never met a street project I didn't like. But when we took money out of our fund balance for this, it was a very serious step. And we took money out there to improve the quality of our streets, not to deal with traffic issues. And this is a traffic issue that probably affects every neighborhood that is adjacent to a section line road. The access in and out of the neighborhood is difficult. And I think this is bad policy, bad public policy to move this around to solve a traffic problem when we allocated that money to improve our streets. The particular section of street that is being denied an improvement this time is a mile between Wilshire and Britton on May Avenue, which is in dire need of help, both from this standpoint, improving the quality of the surface of the drive lanes, and some drainage issues. Now, the drainage issues wouldn't be improved significantly by the paving of the street, but we would get much, I hate to use this term, a bigger bang for our buck if we invested that money in May Avenue. We have residential areas adjacent to May Avenue that have a constant problem getting in and out of their addition. May Avenue carries significantly more traffic. We would impact a number of citizens, a greater number of citizens, if we kept this project where it is. And with all due respects to Councilman Shadid, I would have made the same comments had he been here. I think it's bad public policy, then I think we don't get as big a bang for our dollar investing in a traffic solution than we do in street surface. Thank you.
Mayor, in response, I share some of Councilman Ryan's views, but we've always permitted a pretty broad latitude within the wards to do the things with regard to streets and traffic improvements that needed to be done. I don't think this is that big a stretch to permit this to be done. If you look at the past, this was created, this problem was created and abetted, in fact, by the expenditure of thousands of dollars of money that was out of bond funds that created that made the Class and Curve project work through the way it worked at Grand Boulevard. So, I mean, it really is just fixing a problem that was created another way. I'm going to repeat myself. Keep it up, which I probably have already done.
Okay. Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, since I was involved in the action to get the money taken out of the general fund from the reserve to put into street resurfacing or street improvements, my idea at that time, and I think our council idea, was to fix those areas within each ward that had the most problem, and not knowing the relative difference between May Avenue and this over in Western. I think we have to defer to Councilman Shadid's wisdom on that. If it's a bad decision, then I think he has to answer for it, but I'm inclined to go along with it, giving him the benefit of the doubt that he knows which of those two roads will benefit the most from the $1 million, because it does not affect, correct me, Mr. Couch, it does not affect any of the resurfacing that are going on in the other 7 wards or whatever that money was used for.
That is correct.
And so we have control over that, and I think we need to defer to Councilman Shadid.
Any other comments or questions on the item?
Well, if I'd had discretion on the way that money could be spent in my ward, we would have done some of the residential streets that are where the sub-base have collapsed and the streets are nothing but a series of holes and patches. We didn't have that. We were directed to put it on arterial streets. So there wasn't the discretion that I think has been suggested by my colleagues over there. We were limited in how that money was to be.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. We ready to vote? All right, cast your votes. The item passes by a count of 6-2. Gary, you want to continue with items from council? All right. Larry, items from council?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to congratulate the folks out of Western Heights School District. They dedicated the new Bridgestone Middle School last Thursday night. Jan Davenport, the chairman of the Board of Education, Joe Kitchens, Pete Palmer, and the staff out there did a great job. Folks from Bridgestone came all the way from Tennessee because they donated the land for that school, and it should be a tremendous asset to that part of town. I'd like to congratulate the neighbors in Windsor Hills who braved the weather on Saturday to go to their neighborhood meeting, and it was a good meeting. And then continue to congratulate the Friends of Northwest 10th Street. The board met yesterday afternoon again to keep progress going on Northwest 10th Street to address some of the very serious problems out there, and they're doing a great job. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Pete?
Just a comment, Your Honor. Some of you may know that Safari McDoulet, who was Brian Mond's community relations director, died last night in an automobile accident on Highway 9 east of Norman. I don't know how much you can say about her. I worked with her where she has staffed a number of projects and things that the commissioner and I have done together. And she went to Grant. She's just born and raised in South Oklahoma City, and she was an absolutely perfect person for him, because at that time his commission district primarily was South Oklahoma City. It's kind of changed now, but she just was absolutely priceless with regard to the work she did, and all the projects that I ever worked on her, she was about as good a staff member as I've ever been around. And the services will be Saturday for her on the Saturday the 25th at 2 o'clock at Southern Hills Baptist Church. Her mother, Patty McDoulet, is a 25-year employee of the city of Oklahoma City. She's the director of the Will Rogers Park Center, the center we have there. Just been a very valued employee of the city, and it's just a great loss to the community for someone with the talent that Safari had to lose them. It's just a really sad day for us, and I would ask that perhaps when it's appropriate, perhaps not as soon as next week, but as soon as it's appropriate, that we put an item on the agenda for condolences to the family. Like I say, I've not worked on any projects that she was involved in that she just wasn't all in. I mean, she just made things happen, and she was really a quality staff person. So I just want to let everybody know that.
Thank you. David?
I share Pete's comments about Safari. She truly did bring a lot of enthusiasm to her job, and it's a great loss. So my condolences to her family as a result of that. So that's it. Thank you.
Meg?
I really did want to make some of the same comments. I got that very sad text message last night from Commissioner Mon, and I also have had the opportunity for the last 3 or 4 years to work with Safari. She was just a joy. She was wonderful. And so I'd like to express my condolences both to her family and to Commissioner Mon and his staff. I know they're experiencing a lot of sadness today. We also have some great things going on in Ward 6. We had a Economic Development Committee meeting yesterday and just talking about some of these small commercial revitalization districts that are occurring. Russell's staff and Kim Cooper Hart are just doing such a great job. Some of them we talk about a lot. The Plaza District is one, but some that are emerging. Northwest Uptown 23rd Street, I believe, is what they're calling themselves. They've developed a fantastic new logo. They've got a series of hard-working committees talking about everything from code enforcement to security and beautification. And I think we're going to see some really great things, and I want to compliment what's going on in Planning Department in helping kind of herd all these energies together. Great stuff for the city.
All right. Skip?
Yes, I would like to echo the same sentiments in reference to the loss of Safari. And I remember one Saturday afternoon, Brian and his staff picked me up to give me, or at least to share with me some of the projects they were doing on the south side of Oklahoma City. And for a whole afternoon, I was just absolutely taken by the energy that he and his staff puts into the SHINE program and all the work that they were doing in one of the neighborhoods. And so, it's going to be a great loss, and my condolences to the family.
Okay. Pat?
Your Honor, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say something about parks. We approved a really great park project today, but I don't think we ought to lose sight of the value of the little smaller pocket parks that people can walk to. We want to encourage walkability, and I think if we have some neighborhood parks that are small, compact, and within walking distance of the neighborhoods, we would have a major achievement there. And secondly, I'd like to say something about Allied Arts. I want to encourage our entire community to support that to the extent they can. It has a significant benefit in, I think, two important areas. The first, obviously, is the quality of life in our community. We have a wide variety of opportunities that are represented by the Allied Arts Foundation. And secondly, the economic development aspect of that. When I started economic development work at OG&E in the early 1970s, businesses asked about rail connections, they asked about airlines, they asked about highways. Now they seem to be more and more concerned about the quality of life they can offer their employees when they consider relocating. And I think the Allied Arts efforts and the agencies that are represented by Allied Arts in this campaign are worthy of our support from that standpoint. And this is a sort of a third personal thing. Years ago, I had the opportunity to co-chair this particular campaign. It's one of the most difficult fundraising efforts anybody can get involved in. First of all, it's for operating expenses, and there's not much glamour in paying for rents and that sort of thing. And the second thing is you're asking people generally who are supportive of the arts, but they have a favorite. And they'd rather give their money to their favorite art agency rather than to spread it around. So it is a difficult campaign, and it deserves our support for a variety of reasons. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Pat. City Manager reports.
We have two presentations this morning. We're going to start with Russell Klaus, who's going to give us a short update on Plan OKC. And I know some of the council are actually members of the Plan OKC Steering Committee. I know Councilman Greenwell, Councilman White, Councilman Shadid, and Councilman who's the fourth? Councilman Ryan. And so have been involved in the process, and Russell's going to give us a little bit of an update on that process.
Thank you, City Manager, and thanks for the opportunity to do an update here. Plan OKC has been going on for some time now. A lot of the work that's been done up to date has been behind the scenes in terms of all the data gathering, although we have had a very extensive interaction with the public so far, and it's not working. Technical difficulties? So really, I just wanted to give it a little overview of what that public input process has been. We have three essential phases to this, to the process. Phase one, which is the identification of all the issues, and these are all the items that impact the content and purpose of the plan. So it's anything that's important to the city, to the community, to us as the planning department, and what we perceive to be the things that we need to focus on moving forward as we develop, finalize the plan, and then implement it. We have been working with a number of different groups and individuals. We have city staff working groups, which is a little different from what's been done in the past. We've been working with 13 different departments. We have working groups set up so that we're looking at what the issues are in common between their mission and what we're trying to accomplish in Plan OKC, so that we're all on the same page and that the final plan is going to reflect all of those individual missions. We're also meeting with the community through stakeholder groups, and we've had a number of larger public meetings, but most of our interaction has been through individual stakeholder groups that are focused on the elements of the plan. And there are 8 key elements of the plan, things addressing land use, transportation, public safety, etc. And those groups have been meeting for as long as they've needed to meet to identify the issues. We also wanted to underpin this document with a health message, because planning, not only in land use but in any number of other ways, does have a significant impact on the way that people behave in the community as relates to their health. So that's an important part of this, and we've had probably more engagement through that group, through the Healthy Communities Oversight Group, than anything else. It's very important to the community, and we've had a lot of input on that. We've also continued to communicate back through our website, and we also have Facebook and Twitter, so we're providing this opportunity for the community to interact with us in a number of different ways. And I want to stress that city staff are always available to take input in that respect. And then we have the Citizens Advisory Team, which we've just set up. They had their first meeting a couple of weeks ago. We have the second meeting coming up this Friday, and then another meeting on March the 9th. As relates to the first phase, where we identified the issues, we then staff distilled as much as we could what we perceived to be the central goals emanating from those issues. So these are sort of the broad overview goals. The next step is going to be to take that to the Citizens Advisory Team, which you've all, I think, familiar with the membership of this. We have, as Mr. Couch mentioned, 4 City Council members. We also have 4 Planning Commissioners and the Planning Commission Chair. We have 3 representatives from public schools, 3 from the development sector, 2 from the Healthy Communities Oversight Group, and then an individual community representative for each of those 8 elements that I'd mentioned, and then a couple of at-large positions. And the primary role of the Citizens Advisory Team is going to be to provide advice as we continue through this next phase, as we refine the goals that have been sort of roughly defined at this point in time. We did have a couple of public meetings to get input from the public after we'd identified what those goals were. We're now taking it to the Citizen Advisory Team. They'll look at those goals and further refine those, and that's the purpose of the meeting on coming this Friday and on March the 9th. We're intending to look at 4 of those elements on each of those meeting dates, and if necessary, we'll have another meeting. But the intent is to try and get the goals refined and then be able to take that back out to the public again, let them know that we've refined what their initial input has been, make sure we get their feedback, that they're okay with this. If there's any changes, then we take that back to the Citizens Advisory Team again. In the meantime, we will be converting those goals into policy actions that is going to take some time, and this is probably going to take us out at least to the end of the year. We have, I'm going to take that on, Susan. We're going to go to the next one. This will take us out at least to the end of the year, as I mentioned. We have a number of studies that are concurrent with this process, and this is where we'll also engage the Citizens Advisory Team. So when they finish with the goal refining, then we will engage them as we see necessary in terms of ensuring that we get the results we want out of all of these different studies. Most of that will wrap up at the end of the year. We'll have most of our policy developed, hopefully in early next year, and that's when the next major heavy lifting phase of the Citizens Advisory Team is going to take place, when we take the results of those plans, the policies that have been developed as a result of the information they've provided and the goals that we've set, and then the Citizens Advisory Team is going to help us in ensuring that the policies that we have crafted are a true reflection of what the community has provided and what is important to the City Council, Planning Commission, and every other stakeholder involved in this process. So next steps are going to be, as I said, finalising those goals. We do have, as you saw, several different studies there we'll be working on. Most of them are underway. We have one more to go, which is a sort of citizen survey. We need to get a little further down the line before we do that. And we anticipate that hopefully we'll be able to wrap this up in 2013. There's a lot of information still to digest. It's a difficult task pulling all this together so that it makes sense and that it makes an easily implementable policy document. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Larry, why don't you go ahead?
Russell, if you would, just clarify something in my mind. On this slide right here, you've got the finalized goal as one of the future steps. And what I heard you saying is in those areas that you identified prior to this, each of those areas would have certain goals that the people who are participating in it wanted to have accomplished.
That is correct.
Okay. Will those goals be presented to us on the City Council before you get involved in drafting policy?
We were planning on taking the goals through the Citizens Advisory Team. That was the process for review there. I mean, we'd be happy to bring it to the council, of course.
Well, my personal preference would be that we would have an opportunity to look at those goals, maybe after they've come through your advisory team, to make sure that we understand the direction that you're recommending. That's just a personal preference.
No, we'd be delighted to do that, because obviously it's extremely important that the council is fully on board with this, and you know, I'd love to have as many opportunities to present this information as we go along.
Great. Any other questions? Russell, I did just have a quick question when I was reading the earlier material. We received a $500,000 HUD grant to fund a lot of the consultant.
It is funding most of those studies. There's the Parks Master Plan, which was a separate funding source, and then we also had the Employment Lands, which was another funding source also.
And I was just curious kind of where we are. Have we allocated most of those $500,000?
It has been assigned to all of those studies.
Okay, great.
We haven't spent it all yet.
But it's been essentially
yes.
committed.
Right.
Okay.
Those were the two on the docket today as well.
And are there any consultant studies that you feel like you need further? I mean, have we?
No, I think we're pretty well covered now. That HUD grant was extremely helpful. Would have made it a lot more difficult, a lot more timely for us to have to go through this without that.
Great.
Oh, don't ask the planning director if he wants to do more studies.
I knew I was opening up a can of worms, perhaps.
Well, now that you mention it.
Your Honor, I have a request to make, similar to Councilman McAtee's. We get ready to draft policies. Before we draft the policies, could we get maybe a review here at City Council level? You at least have a feel for where those policies are going to impact before we get to wordsmithing the actual draft of the policy.
Sure. Well, obviously, when the goals come forward, you'll have some input at that point in time, and then
Exactly.
actually develop the policies, which will be adopted by council. But prior to that, if you'd like to have, we can do that in stages if you prefer.
I would think it'd be valuable to not get too much at one time, to segment these.
Yeah, we have discussed that, because it is going to end up as it's a comprehensive plan, so there are going to be a lot of different policies that have to be articulated to implement those goals. So we don't want to overwhelm anybody with the whole thing at one point in time. And at this point, we don't know how this is going to play out after we've finalized the goals, and we've still got the studies that are going to provide us with a significant amount of additional information we need to be able to develop those. So.
Thank you, Russell, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This is great work, and it's somewhat overwhelming. I do believe that.
Thanks for all your comments.
Thank you. Alrighty, we also have another report,
Right.
Manager?
We have a presentation this morning based upon comments that council made last week about the Bicentennial Park. We've got a presentation this morning. Eric Winger is going to kick that off. And if you recall, there was some questions about a month ago when I went through the DDRC. Councilman Shadid prompted some discussion. Others brought up questions about the park last week. Subsequent to last week, it did go through the Downtown Design Review Committee and was approved by that body last Thursday. The plan is to make a presentation here today just to present information, not to take any action today. That will be followed by an action item tomorrow with the Economic Development Trust, and then brought back a week from today to this body, to the City Council, for action on the contract award of this project. And so with that, Mr. Winger.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity, and I think as I introduce the presentation that we have this morning for you, a lot of the information that you're seeing has actually been in some planning documents. It's been in the actual final plans, but it's not been publicly presented until several weeks ago when we first went to the DDRC in January. this is a background really of the project that we wanted to bring to you and to make sure that you understand that there was a process that has been followed. And this project actually began clear back in August of 2010. It was actually a project that was listed in the implementation agreement with Devon, and it was approved even earlier the year before. So this is a Project 180 project that's been planned for some time. The plan was presented to and recommended. This preliminary report was last spring in March and in May. There were presentations made to two of the groups at that time, but for the City Council, it was just included in your packets, and there was not a formal presentation made, which is, again, why we're here today, to make sure that you have all the information before you. We were working very closely with the architect and with the community. There's also been a lot of coordination with the Arts Commission. One of the items that you'll find in the presentation is there's a lot of historic markers. There's monuments, and there's some art that's in the current Bicentennial Park that needs to be relocated, needs to be salvaged and maintained and preserved. And so there has been a significant survey done, one that's actually got photos of every one of those items. They've been cataloged, and that went to the Arts Commission to ensure that they were knowledgeable and were prepared to actually start those relocations. That was approved last October in 2011. The final plans were approved in December. One of the questions that we received over the past few weeks is why we actually completed the plans early without actually having all the approvals in place. As many of you know, later this year in 2012 is the 75th anniversary of the Civic Center Music Hall. This park is obviously a key element of that facility. So one of the goals was to align that construction schedule with that grand reopening. And so had we not advanced the plans last year, there would not have been an opportunity to complete the work by that time. And so we did move forward with the bidding of the project. The project was bid and bids were received. The contract has not been approved, and as City Manager mentioned, that is what's going to be on your agenda next week for consideration. We have successfully completed our DDRC review and recommendation. There was a unanimous recommendation from the DDRC just a couple of weeks ago to move this project forward. There is a construction contract that is scheduled for the Economic Development Trust tomorrow for their consideration, and then again we will be back next Tuesday with that contract for your consideration as well. But with that, we do have the presentation for you today. If we'll move to the next slide, I want to introduce to you that there was a citizen process, there was a stakeholder process that was included. This was a process very similar to the Myriad Botanical Gardens process, where there was a number of individuals from different agencies that were involved, and there was a total of 9 steering committee meetings. Next slide, please. And this is a list of a lot of those members, and you'll see if you'll look at some of the representations that they have. We've got city staff, of course, but we also have Civic Center Music Hall, OKC Museum of Art, Chamber of Commerce, Leadership OKC, the Arts Commission, and others. And I think that through our discussions we found that there probably could have been more participation, and I think a couple of the things that we've learned is as we work through the process, that were things that we might like to have changed over the past year to just make sure that there was more awareness of the Bicentennial Project. But at this time, we want to present to you the history, the design itself, to be able to answer some questions. And so I want to invite Jim Crosby with PDG up to the podium. They are the lead architect for the Bicentennial Park, and of course staff will also be available for questions afterwards.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Jim Crosby from Planning Design Group. I appreciate Mayor and Council that giving us the opportunity to go over the plans with you and try and get you familiar with this and be able to answer questions and comments when we're complete. Randy Elliott is here. He is a member of the team as well, strong member of the team, and Randall helped me with the presentation and be here for comments as well. I'll kind of get it started, and I've been known to ramble on, so I'm going to try and put it in high gear here and go through this so that we have plenty of time before we run out of time, so that council members can ask questions and we can comment on those specific questions. This was kind of just one of our inspirational slides. This is obviously the original concept from 1930. This was completed by Hare & Hare out of Kansas City. This shows the municipal complex with the Civic Center to the top of the page to the west. Bicentennial Park, which was known as Civic Center Park originally, in the center, City Hall, and then the courthouse to the east. You might go back to that real quick, Mike, just pointing out a couple of the key elements. Trying to get a pointer here. But Obviously, you see the grand lawn. What we've tried to do is be respectful to this design and keep the historic integrity of the plan in place. We have preserved that grand lawn, which has been there since its inception. It's there currently today, and we want to renovate that grand lawn and bring it up to a higher standard of turf and maintenance to it. We continue to keep the trees along the perimeter on the north and south. The sweeping lines, we've kind of, in our design, you'll see sweeping lines. We were kind of inspired by the sweeping lines that were on that original plan that never got constructed in the 1930s there, but we were intrigued by those sweeping lines. And today, we're not considering the City Hall project anymore from the funding standpoint and design standpoint. We're only here to kind of go over Bicentennial Park, but Civic Center was in our original plans, and so it did encompass everything on the Civic Center and City Hall grounds. Some of the elements that kind of inspired us is the Art Deco motif that you'll see on a lot of the buildings. All of the buildings, as a matter of fact, have this aluminum architectural millwork that you'll see in the windows and in the prominent locations on the buildings. You'll see kind of a overwhelming idea of a central axis with sweeping lines. We picked this up. You see it in different forms here on the different work. This one in particular was very inspiring to us. You see kind of, if you look at it from this angle, a central axis, and then the sweeping lines from each direction sweeping into the center of, in our case, the park. So this was very inspirational in our concept to create the Art Deco style design and pick up that flavor of the 1930s. Here you'll see the master plan in a plan view, and I'm going to spend most of the time right here kind of explaining so I can point to the different areas and things, and then we'll go through a series of caricature sketches where you can kind of see what it would look like from ground level and from aerial views from different locations in the park. Obviously, you can see from stairs to stairs there's a dominant central axis. The sweeping lines that I was referring to on a lot of the architectural millwork sweeping right into the center of the Civic Center. Also, that brings you into the center of the park. Currently, the park has walls and it has limited access into the park. In the current design, you'll have access at the corners and a primary access in the center. But there's concrete walls and impediments that go through both areas on all four sides, north and south, that keep you from entering into the park. And so in our discussions, a lot of the members, we felt like that the park design currently tried to keep you out onto the perimeters, whether you're going to the Civic Center or just down the streets east to west, that you really didn't feel like you wanted to sweep into the heart of the park and the center of the park. And so again, the sweeping lines provided several things. It provided that good pedestrian access right into the middle of the park. It provides great access for the Civic Center when they're having functions. This plan also illustrates the new streetscape that's under construction as it'll look when it's complete. The 45-degree parking and the increased number of parking spaces out there. So, you know, in events in the Civic Center, you'll have a lot of parking on these perimeters, and this is going to bring you, opposed to walking down the sides and staying out on the perimeter with the cars. We want to bring the people into the center of the park. And also there's a couple reasons for that. There's the option for Jim Brown, and he's talked extensively about the redesign and had his input so that we can create spaces for Jim Brown to have, in the Civic Center, to have pre-event functions, which can occur in these plazas down here. The sweeping lines also, though, before I get down to that end, what they do is part of the charge was that we were to create an area where future sculptures and possibly mobile art shows could stage. So with this design, we felt like this worked very well with the sculpture and the art possibilities by creating these rooms or like galleries that you'd see in an art museum. So we have places where sculptures, art, and things can be put into these different rooms or galleries and displayed, whether that be permanent art, whether it be the pieces that are in the park now and that the Art Commission recommends them to come back. We have places that we can house those, as well as possibilities of traveling art shows that come to the Art Museum that could stage on the grounds here. We have several plazas down at this end. We have a north plaza and a south plaza that mirror. Obviously, you can see the design is very symmetrical. What's on the north is on the south. So we have the plazas on the north and south down adjacent to the Civic Center. We have what we call a fountain stage in this area. We've worked with the Planning Department and DDRC on making some revisions to that. This presentation today shows those revisions as they approved those in the meeting last week. Great gathering areas in this area. We've also, on the drive, one of the things we did is there's bollards all along that drive now. We've removed those bollards and gone back in with just a traditional traffic control of a curb, much less obtrusive, and wanted to keep a low profile there. So we went back in with a curve that flushes out in this pedestrian area. This pedestrian area is about 80 feet across for the drop-off, and kind of a vehicular as well as pedestrian plaza with our special paving in there. Kind of backing up a step, we have the bookends here of the Civic Center to City Hall. We have the plaza that exists out in front of City Hall now, so as you can see, we brought that across Walker to make the connection into the park there with a strong connection, and you can see bringing that across there. What we've done is, in this central corridor, there's nothing over 12 inches tall in there. There was a little bit of misconception on our fountain stage originally that was a tall item that would be like a theatrical stage and be 36 inches or 40 inches tall or something, but it's only 12 inches tall, just enough to give a little bit of an area for the performance to feel like they have a stage. We've relocated the fountain down onto the grade with some safety concerns, so that fountain will be on grade, and again, the stage, which will remain back in this back half of the area, will be elevated 12 inches only. The fountain is a fountain that's programmed. It has programs where the fountain can come on and do different spray arrangements, and it can also be programmed to some songs. So there'll be some songs that would be selected, and those could be, in theme to something that might be going on in the Civic Center, or something maybe a little more lively for a Saturday afternoon. It'll be a programmable fountain. With the wind in Oklahoma City being a problem, we have a wind control on the fountain so that it's a variable speed. We can set that to a multitude of different wind speeds that it's not either on or off, but it'll throttle the fountain down. So if on a normal day it's spraying 12 feet in the air and the wind starts to pick up, it might throttle down to 50% where it's only spraying 6 feet in the air, and then it can throttle down, to a lower level, but then also we'll have it set so that when it hits a certain speed, it'll turn itself off so that we're not spraying water all over the park. On the north perimeter up here, the park is not, if everything looks a little crooked, I don't know if it was the surveying back in the day, but everything's not perfectly square. We've squared up the park and made it symmetrical, but in doing that, it left about 10 or 12 feet in addition on this north side. So in conjunction with the streetscape, we've added about 10 foot of sidewalk and a second row of trees, and then we've added some game tables up in that area, which is closer to the residential area. We hope, from a standpoint that this can kind of be adopted by the residents to the north as like a neighborhood park. I heard a comment about neighborhood parks. Obviously, this is a municipal park, municipal grounds, and this is in the downtown area, but now with the residential happening to the north, they can use this as if it was a neighborhood park as well. Walk the dog, go on a picnic, throw the Frisbee, any of those type of things. As I go through here, I'm sure I'm going quickly and I'm forgetting some things. I'm going to let Rand come up and he's probably listening back there on catching what I've missed, and some history of, Rand is great with the history. There's the history of the railroad, and I'll let Rand talk about that, the history, of the buildings and the WPA and all that, and Rand's great on talking about that. One other thing I'll notice here, in clearing this entire corridor of anything of over 12 inches, we've also relocated the banner poles that serve as advertising or for the events and things for the Civic Center. They've been pulled to the sides a little bit more so that they are visible when you come in the entry roads, but they don't block the front of the museum. And then as well, our signs, we have 2 signs with Walker going to two-way traffic. We have a sign to the north and a sign to the south that was something that was modified again in the comments and conversation with DDRC, and we were out of compliance with the sign ordinance a little bit, so we have made revisions so that we meet the sign ordinance there. Rand, why don't you come up and hit some highlights on what I passed.
Give him a minute to collect his breath. My name is Rand Elliott. I live at 425 Northwest 15th. First off, we've had a fabulous experience, and we appreciate the opportunity and the support of the city on working on such an important project. A couple of things that are, I think you might enjoy. Jim alluded to the fact of the history. If you were to look at some early Sanborn maps of downtown Oklahoma City actually stopped at Walker. And there's a wonderful note on the drawing that says farmland on the left of Walker, and so that's a wonderful historic document. The other part is that the black lines in the paving actually represent and are a part of the notion of embedding history into this park, and this was the train yard is what this was. And there's a fabulous photograph showing a train building just north of the Skirvin, and this photograph shows everybody excited and happy about this. Well, if you look more carefully into the history of it, they weren't excited about something happening. They were excited that the building was about to be torn down and that what the community called the Iron Wall was about to be erased, which was the railroad tracks going through east to west in downtown. Knowing that that is an important piece of history, this notion of embedding history into the plan has been a very important part of our project. And so the black lines and these linear elements literally suggest what history might have been. Jim's touched on the other things that I think are really important here, and it truly is inspired by the Art Deco architecture and flavor and spirit of what we have in this very important piece. This axial connection, this linear connection east to west has been very important to continue that relationship between two buildings. And as Jim mentioned, the notions of using Civic Center and City Hall as bookends is really important. We're going to actually do floodlighting on both buildings, and so if you were in the park, you could look left or look right and see those important historic buildings in each location. There's also been discussion about what do. You don't just open a park and expect people to come and participate. And throughout our year plus of discussion and planning, there's lots of thought about how do we get this activated, how do we activate this park. And it's gone from everything from we would engage the Legacy Apartments next door to come and adopt this as their personal park, if you will. All sorts of program issues like that have been discussed, but one very important one was to try to create an event that might become a signature event for this particular park. And an example for that has come up is the notion of maybe there's a food festival, something along those lines that could be a part of making this park an identifiable centerpiece for downtown. So I think I just added, did a little cleanup there for Jim, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yeah, sure. You want to talk about
kind of the character sketches? This as well is a picture as it stands now from Google Earth, so you can see the park as it is now. Grand Lawn, we preserved the Grand Lawn. This would be a view from Walker, looking, on the plaza at City Hall, looking back to the Civic Center. You can see that down through that corridor, there's nothing of any height, and that it opens a clear view from east to west, both directions. Our sweeping walls, I forgot to mention, those are granite walls that are 30 inches high, and the soil behind those berms up to create some movement. In our meetings, that kind of, our discussion was it kind of represents the rolling terrain of Oklahoma and the sweeping plains, and so as flat as the site is, we thought it was interesting to introduce a little bit of movement with the ground there. Another picture of the Grand Lawn. You can see that it just looks a little tired right there. We'll have all new lawn. Maintenance was kind of as a question that's come up, and just real briefly, we have worked extensively with the Park Department on maintenance. We're going to install all new irrigation system, all new electrical system, new plumbing, sewer connections, water connections that are required for the fountain and for the irrigation. There's another aerial view looking back from the northwest to the southeast. You can see the plazas, the fountain in the foreground, the lawn, trees. With the trees there now, they've been planted real close over the years, and you know, some of them, they look good as a mass, but as an individual tree, they were kind of planted close together. We've spaced the trees appropriately, so they'll have room to grow and mature as they're intended.
One thing that's, I think, pretty interesting to note here is that in our conversations with Jim Brown, he said we have 350,000 people a year that use the Hall of Mirrors in the Civic Center. And this view, if you went back, Michael, if you were to see this view, there's a great number of people that enjoy this view for events at the Civic Center itself.
While you're talking about the trees, because this is one of the items that I've had a lot of people contact me on, and I'm asking a question I know the answer to because I got the information yesterday, but I think the public ought to be aware of an arborist was engaged in this process and was utilized to study the trees, study whether any of them were salvageable, what was the best trees to put in there, so forth?
Yes, sir, it was. We did engage an arborist, and with part of the evaluation is with the extensiveness of the renovation of the park, removal of all the hardscape and everything, and then all new infrastructure put in. As you can see, and there'll be a slide or two that come up with the streetscape construction, you can see how intense the construction is. And with all new infrastructure and everything, this site's going to be really, the trees would be really stressed to do all the digging and compaction and everything here. And as a group, you know, and as a landscape architect, you know, I'm all about trees. And it was just decided as a group that, you know, this project would be too hard to work around those trees with everything that we're going to do in the renovation, and that the effort that went into some of the trees at Myriad Garden to move those big trees and spend $25,000 on a tree, and now you know, it's become a big chore, and the success rate of that, I'm not saying they're all dying by any means, but, you know, it has been a struggle. We've talked with the park department on the, you know, how they have to try and maintain those trees, and they're losing some of those trees, and it's a big expense. We did identify 10 or 12 trees that we thought, the arborist thought would be appropriate to move, and we did have a bid item in our bid package for that. And we did have money budgeted for that. It was decided that with the high cost of maintenance and the problems that they've been having at Myriad Gardens, that was struck from the bid package. It could be added back in, I think. We've talked about that just in, you know, recent days. And you know, if the contract is approved next week, there's still time to do that while those trees are dormant, and to move 10 or 12 of those trees.
The size of the new trees coming in?
Yeah, the size of the new trees, they're not going to be small trees like you'd see on the streetscape. In Myriad Garden, there were several that are, you know, several areas where they did incorporate large trees, but these will be 6-inch caliper trees. They'll be 22 to 24 foot tall. They'll be of a variety that's consistent with the streetscape and what's going on with downtown, so that we all tie in. And then I personally will go with the contractor that's going to install these trees to Georgia and hand tag these trees. Yes, sir.
Larry?
Well, yeah, thank you, Mayor. I also have had several comments about the trees. If an individual, evidently there's one tree there, Rand, and I don't know which one it is, was planted in like 1937. If an individual citizen has some number of trees that they really are attached to, is there any way that they can get information about whether those are candidates of that number of trees that might be relocated? Is there any way that they could find out?
Yes, we have a plan that was included in our construction documents that identified those trees that we scheduled to remove. They are, I'm sure, would not be the tree that would have been planted in 1937, because that would be a tree that would, I would speculate, be huge. And the trees that are kind of down the center corridor there are some oaks primarily that are in the 10 to 13-inch caliper range, which is a significant tree, were the ones that were identified to be able to be moved with a 110-inch tree spade.
Larry, one thing that is important to note is that the park that's there today is a 1970s park. And so much of the landscaping, we believe, was added and changed in the 1970s.
As well, there was a modification in the 50s from our research, too. So there was a modification in the 50s, 76, basically, with the Bicentennial Park, and then again in early 2000s.
I think one of the comments that came from your conversation with Councilman Mars, the arborist who was involved, serious look was made of the trees, and it was not just a capricious decision that they're gone. It was a lot of logic behind there that from an architectural standpoint and from a tree health standpoint, et cetera, and maintenance in the future.
Yes. Another thing that the arborist pointed out, and he was the same arborist that did work on, he was one of the arborists that did work on the Myriad Gardens, and so he was familiar with relocating the large trees within the Oklahoma City and the park system. But another thing, you know, I kind of alluded to those trees. Some of those trees are planted. I didn't physically measure them. We do have them on a survey, and I could, but they're 15 or 20 feet apart, where it's an oak tree that might have a canopy at its mature size of 40 or 50 feet. So they've all grown together. So, you know, another one of the concerns of the committee as well as the arborist was that if you go and remove the smaller, less desirable trees around and that larger trees there, that by the time you remove the other ones, it's going to be one-sided, and it's going to, you know, the side that grew into the other trees and didn't have any sun is not going to have a branch structure, so it's going to, you know, it's just going to deteriorate, and the health of them is just going to deteriorate greatly with as much work as we're going to do in there is done. Now, on the other hand, which is not under the consideration here, but on the City Hall side, where we were doing much less infrastructure, it has a new irrigation system. We weren't doing all the electrical work. We were able to save most of the trees on that side of the project, and, you know, that's not under consideration today, but just FYI as far as, you know, the different circumstances between the two sides of the project.
Any other questions?
So,
yes.
Rand and John, as it is now, the plan is to remove all the trees that are presently there. Is that right?
That is correct. In the main body of the park, the trees that are up around the Civic Center proper will remain, and Jim Brown requested that we leave for sure the round planters, which remain, and they have some trees planted in them that flank the north and the south sides of the steps, but the trees that are up adjacent to the building all remain.
Okay. And the statutes, is there any consideration for any of the statutes to remain in the park with the new design? I noticed that, you know, I guess where it looked like some of the planters were, that on the open area, was there any consideration for the traffic as you open up the park, where you're taking people off the sidewalk into the middle of the park, that any of the statutes could be situated in some of those areas where there would be open sight to the walking traffic?
I'll say something and then you can add to that, Rand. But yes, in our committee meetings, you know, we had extensive conversations about all the sculptures and the items that are there, the plaques and everything. And so what the committee felt was the best thing to do was for that to go to the Arts Council for recommendations on whether they thought that those pieces should come back to the park. The park department is actually, and Eric can speak about this because he's got a preliminary report from the park department on some of their ideas that they have for those. Some of those can come back to the park. They would be able to be staged in these open areas between the sweeps, I think, if that's appropriate. We felt like it was important for the Art Council to be able to have a say in whether, you know, it was appropriate. And again, I'll let Eric talk about this, but where these pieces might go. But if they feel that the historical significance is that they belong in this park, yes, we can find a home for them in the park, and we have created the park to be able to include sculpture, whether it be those existing pieces or new pieces.
Skip, that was a real important part of the actual RFP from the city, was to renovate the park and to be able to allow it to accept sculpture. And so we've been real sensitive to that, and there are a number of ways that those works could be relocated elsewhere or used here. I mean, there's a plan for consideration. We documented each and every one of those pieces of art. Some are plaques, some are sculpture. All of that is documented in our drawings.
Harry?
To just fill in just a minute of the current plan, the Parks Department's been working very diligently to make sure that all the items, of course, have been cataloged, and as I mentioned, the Arts Commission has already agreed to assist in that overall process. There's 4 major elements that have already come under discussion, and let me just update you briefly on those. The Wiley Post statue is one of the major items that is there, and there's obviously the pending renovations at Wiley Post Park. That's a part of our 2007 bond issue. There's nearly a $9 million renovation of that park that's underway or soon to be underway, and it may choose to be one of the better homes for the Wiley Post statue. The Thomas Stafford statue, again, there is some renovations, as you may have seen in the newspaper yesterday, the Stars and Stripes Park, the return of the Rocket Playground and the capsule and some of those things that are being returned to that park. There was some consideration and some discussion that Thomas Stafford may better be suited there, but again, these decisions have not been made. These are all that would be going back to the Arts Council, Arts Commission for consideration.
And as they make those deliberations, a option, as Randy Elliott pointed out, is back in Bicentennial Park. I mean, there's just an opportunity to review and look at all the pieces and say, where is the best place? Where's the best fit? And where's the best place for the public to enjoy these?
And it's exactly where we're headed with Stanley Draper and also the Bicentennial Monument. I think those are probably the 2 that have also had the most discussion. Obviously, Draper's had a lot of history with the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. There's been discussions regarding their facilities. And then the Bicentennial Monument, Mr. Woods came to City Council last week. He also came to the DDRC meeting and personally preferred that be relocated back to this park. So whether it's the Bicentennial Monument or some of the other figures or statues or markers, there's also 2 time capsules that will be relocated, and the Maestro is actually included in the plans to come back with the construction. So there is already intent to bring some of the art pieces back, and I think we'll work closely with Parks to ensure that the others are safely relocated as well.
Any other comments or questions for the design team?
May I just make a quick comment, Mayor, if it's okay? I wanted to share how much I appreciate everybody coming and the time that you've spent to educate us on this process. I think we discovered a week ago that we probably had a failure in process, and so it's been tremendously helpful, I think, certainly to me and to the rest of my colleagues to have an opportunity to see this. And personally, I'm extremely excited about creating what looks like a new living room, in a sense, to the Civic Center and the Art Museum, in a space that, as a downtown resident, will really be able to enjoy. So thank you for the energy and time that went into creating this design, and I think we're all going to be very pleased with it.
All right. Yeah, Pete?
I have a couple comments. Some of them don't have anything to do with this part of it, but as I look at the list of people that were on the committee, I mean, I'm struck by the fact of the lack of diversity of that group. I didn't see a name on there that I recognized from South Oklahoma City, not one. I didn't see a name that I saw on there that I thought might represent the other ethnic groups in Oklahoma City. I've asked some people to look at the list for me, and they assure me there's no one on that list like that. I'm troubled by that to start out with. This is a major project. Oklahoma City doesn't look like me. It looks like a lot of different people. And the idea that just people that look like me get to decide is difficult, I think. That's just an over comment. Doesn't have anything to do with the design at all. Just has to do with the process. I think I'm also troubled by the fact there wasn't really an HP person on there. There may be some people that have a historical preservation bend, but the historical significance of what's gone on in that park and the placement of those monuments and plaques have historical significance. They were put there for a reason, and I think the reason is that at the time they were put there, that park represented the central park in Oklahoma City, so I think people put them there for a specific reason. The idea that we're going to put them in a box somewhere and then decide later, I find that troubling. I think if we weren't in such a hurry, we could have done that all at one time. Which leads me to another concern I have, which is how did the priorities get established that this became such a rush job and things like the acquisition and the change that is necessary on Santa Fe, on E.K. Gaylord get shoved off because we didn't have the money, but this became just, this is just an absolute rush. This is a huge priority for us. But something that's going to facilitate the construction of the railroad hub is not a priority. We're going to just talk about that later. Now, maybe I was asleep the day that those decisions were made about the priorities, but I don't remember any discussion about them at all. I'm not satisfied with the concern about the trees, but that train appears to have left the station with regard to the trees. I am concerned that we are putting two signs there, two signs at a time when the city's policy has been to kind of restrict those signs. I don't know why one sign with two sides on it wouldn't work just as well as two signs do. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to show pictures of the old park with the grass brown and show pictures of the new park with them painted green and say one of them's tired and the other one's not. It seems to me if you're going to do apples to apples, you'd show them both at their best rather than one of them at its worst and the other one at its best. But that's, again, that train's left the station obviously also. I think I'm disappointed in the process. I'm not, the design, it's like a lot of choices we make in life. What's beautiful to somebody may not be beautiful to somebody else. What's fitting for someone may not be fitting to somebody else. And so I'm not going to get into that part of it. But I think the process itself is flawed. And this is not the first process in this whole thing that's gone on. This is not the first little piece of that process that I felt like was flawed. And I'm really not talking to the right people. You guys are not part of that, and I'm not talking to you. But I think this is an opportunity to say it. There's a number of artwork, pieces of artwork around the city in lots of different places. And it seems to me that if we're going to do this major renovation and relocation of historical art, like a statue is, we could have been much broader and made decisions, because this park could hold some of those things. Some of those things are located at other places. I think the speed has dictated a lack of what I consider sensitivity to some of these things. And that's not, none of you had any control over that, and none of you have any control over that. So that's not a question or a comment directed at you. But when I see things like I have a copy of the book, the inventory, I have a copy of it, and I look at those things in that book, and I know that there a lot of emotion, a lot of sentiment was involved when those things were located there. But because we don't have time to do it, we're going to dig them up, put them in a box, and then wait to decide. And I'm not so sure that they're going to get the attention they would have received had we had the time to look at all of them and say, okay, this is what we're going to do with this, before we decided to clear the deck and put them in a box. We'll see. I've watched with some pain the architectural antiques, if you will, or the architectural artifacts of what happened to downtown Oklahoma City when we tore it up. We're located over in what we call Ford Park now. There's been so little care taken of those. They're almost all of them are beyond reclamation now. You'd almost have to reproduce them as opposed to reclaim those things. And I think I'm afraid that that's what will happen when we put all these things in this box or this closet or this room somewhere where they're just going to be laying there waiting for somebody to decide what happens. I'm afraid the same thing that happened to those architectural artifacts that are in Ford Park is going to happen to those things. And I just think a sense of history with more time would have produced a better result over the long run. And with regard to the location of the art, the design is the design. You either like it or you don't like it, and that's not, I'm not here to umpire, I'm not a judge for that kind of thing. But those artifacts are important. They were really important to somebody, to the mothers of the boys that died in World War II that put that piece over there. That was a big deal. Just because we don't have a citizenry now that remembers there ever was World War II doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Doesn't mean that those aren't important to the history of this city. And I'm just a little troubled by the fact that I believe the speed dictated some decisions or some no decisions that we may regret. I watched that happen as a young man. You know that had to be a hell of a long time ago. But I watched that happen as a young man in downtown Oklahoma City when the decision was made to tear it up. And watched now, fortunately I've lived long enough to see us rebuild it. But everybody said, we'll have a plan that'll work, it'll work. Well, it's only started working like 40 years later. And I'm afraid I won't live to see the bicentennial statuary move back into the park, or Stanley Draper's statue given it doesn't need to be in front of the Chamber of Commerce. Stanley Draper was probably the leading person. I'm being redundant because I said this last week, but that's part of the deal. When I get the microphone, I get to talk. But he was a leader in Oklahoma City. He was not just a Chamber of Commerce guy. He was much bigger in the history of Oklahoma City than just a Chamber of Commerce guy. And so to say, we'll stick him in front of the Chamber of Commerce, or we'll put Wally Post down at Wally Post Park. I'm telling you, the people that use Wally Post Park don't know who Wally Post was. It's not going to make any difference to them. It's kind of a sop to me because now I represent that area. But those people that use that park don't know who Wally Post is. I mean, and he is not a historical figure in the sense of the users of Wally Post Park today. He's a historical figure in the sense of all of Oklahoma. And I just think more sensitivity could be used. The signs, I think that's a big mistake for us to put 2 signs in there when we're talking about visual clutter in other parts of town. I don't know why that doesn't apply to us. So those are just my thoughts.
Councilman, well, just a couple of comments. I know, I understand all your comments. I'm not going to respond to all those comments. 2 things in particular. One is about the signs. The chairman of the Planning Commission called me up a couple of weeks ago and said, I've got a real problem with us not following our own rules. You've got to go to the Board of Adjustment on some of those, and he goes, you've got to claim hardship. And he said, the city needs to follow its own rules. That's not right. I took him to heart. I went back to staff, to Eric, and said, what can we do to make sure that we don't do that? Now, whether you agree that there should be 1 sign or 2 signs, the signs do follow and do not have to go to the Board of Adjustment. So we did make some... We did follow the rules on that. And secondly, on art, I will promise you that we will go, and you can have input into it, the council can all have input, the Arts Commission can have into it, and we will not do this in a slow track. We will go, not going to rush through it, but we'll be judicious and make sure that they are relocated and that all are happy. There's at least a consensus. All is happy might be an overstatement, but there's a consensus, and we'll do it quick. We'll do it in a time.
I guess I would ask this, that the same sense of urgency to relocate those be adopted that there has been to dig them up and put them in a box someplace. That's my concern.
And I will commit to you that we will do that in a judicious manner.
All right. Yeah. Gary?
Well, just to comment, because I'm the one that got on my soapbox last week, but and I've certainly received the comments, good and bad, for that. But I will say this: I'm a lot more comfortable with what's being presented today than I was last week. And I think if I'd had a lot of this information last week, it wouldn't have necessitated my comments like it did. And I think that's a lesson that we've all talked about over the last few days. But I think that the if nothing else, I hope we've learned that there's a whole bunch of people out there in the community that aren't put on these committees, that aren't put on task forces, that don't have a way to communicate some of these, but they do still care about what goes on down here, and they care a lot about what we spend a lot of this money on. So I think the more judicious we are in presenting things as many times as we can and getting that information out there and making sure that they have a chance to come back and voice their opinion, I think the better off we're going to be. But I'll go back to the fact that I'm a lot more inclined to be supportive of this now than I was even a week ago, and I appreciate the information that's come forward on it.
Okay. Larry?
And real quick, Eric, if you could, last week I asked that these drawings be put on the web. Can you give our viewers who are watching a quick way that they can see those on the web?
If you follow the city's link to www.okc.gov, they can be found under the Project 180 link that's on the left side of the page.
Under the Project 180 link on the left side of the page when you go to www.okc.gov.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions? We have a couple of people that have signed up to speak. All right. Sandy Myers? She's been here all morning. All right. Harry Wilson? Okay.
I'm here to represent the South Side.
About time you showed up, Harry. About 40 years late.
Harry Wilson, 1520 Southwest 71st Street. I have a lot of ideas that have already been reviewed that I recognize, so I'm not going to go through all the things I plan to say, but what I did plan to say was about the history of this area, the Music Hall, City Hall, the Oklahoma County Courthouse. They're about all that's left of the significant historical buildings of downtown Oklahoma City. Urban renewal took care of that. This location goes back further than any other part of downtown except the Skirvin Hotel. This is the heart of our city. Therefore, in my opinion, it should be treated that way. The city fathers wisely told the railroad to move further south, and the building and others west and east of here were built by the WPA in the early 30s. They've been here at this location for the past 80 years almost. Anything done in the city's bicentennial park should be related to that history. There are statues that relate to our history, and there could be more if all the historical artifacts of our city's history were gathered here, as Pete said. An outdoor display of our history, bookended by these most historical buildings, could be a wonderful outdoor display of our history. My main idea is a statue that would be a great addition to this park and to our city, and that is the 89er statue given to the people of Oklahoma City in 1960 by one of our great men in the history of our city, B.D. Eddy. I've talked to Clay Farha, his grandson, and he agrees that it's in the wrong place now. It's in an alley, and nobody ever sees it, but everybody would see it, especially our visitors to our city and our own citizens, and it would remind them that that statue commemorates the people who founded this city in 1889. It's the 89er statue. What better place for it to be than in this great new park, and there are some wonderful places in the park, just east of the fountain or on one of the plazas or the other. It would be a fantastic addition to our city and to this park if it was lighted, landscaped, and made to be the centerpiece of this park. And it should be, because it relates our history and how our city was started. Next stop is the Art Commission in Wendell, Wisneham. Thanks for your time.
Sandy Myers, 1603 Drury Lane, here in Oklahoma City or Nichols Hills. Mayor Cornett and council members, thank you for letting me address you. I have 2 points that I would like to emphasize. The first one is the length of time that this plot of land has been discussed, and secondly, the people that have been involved in looking at this property. The Alliance for Cultural Facilities was formed in 1989 by me and Joe Carroll Cameron. The purpose was the improvement of cultural facilities in downtown Oklahoma City. Information from this fed into Mayor Norick's Cultural Task Force that then fed into the formation of maps as constructed by Rick Harrow, who was hired by our Chamber of Commerce. A part of the proposal was restructuring of what is now known as Bicentennial Plaza. I want to summarize the first point, and the timetable was 1989, Alliance for Cultural Facilities, a committee of 120 people from South Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, North Oklahoma, East and West, specifically diversified selection. In 2002, the redesigning or improvement of the park was handed to leadership of Oklahoma City at their request. 2009, my husband Stuart and I were asked once again to look into the funding for this park renovation. In the late 2009, the plans for Devon Tower and renovation of downtown Oklahoma City were revealed, and a committee headed by Rand Elliott was formed to look into the design of Bicentennial Plaza once again. Second point, the people involved, as I did allude to earlier. The committee in late 2009, that's recently, included Kathy O'Connor, Russell Klaus, Larry Ogle, Mike Clark, Laura Story, Andre French, Roy Williams, and Jane Jenkins. There were adjacent arts groups to this property that were also included. Glenn Gentile, who is the head of the Museum of Art, Jim Brown, the manager of Civic Center, Beth Short, head of Leadership Oklahoma City. There were private citizens included: Sandy Myers, Terry Cooper, Carol Troy, Alan Payne. As was stated earlier, there were 9 meetings over approximately 8 to 9 months. There were 4 concepts developed and presented. There were 5 proposals presented. My conclusion: the decision of redevelopment of this park has been over 23 years of preparation and discussion with public and private citizens from all walks of life. Hundreds of people have been involved. It is time to make the park a spectacular centerpiece for the cultural area of downtown Oklahoma City, which to me and hundreds of other people is very, very important. Thank you for your time.
Mayor, I just want to...
Yes, thank you.
I had the opportunity to work with Sandy Myers when we redid the Civic Center renovation back in the late 1900s. No, it was late 1900s. It was the late 1900s. It was late 1900s, early 21st century here. Yeah, now I'm off track. But she was very passionate about the Civic Center at that point in time. It put her heart and soul in the meetings that we had with her on that. And I think most of you will realize that the Civic Center really turned out to be the renovation turned out to be a great, great facility. And she was very involved with that at that point in time. And she hasn't lost her passion for the building and the grounds.
All right. Yeah, David?
If it's okay, I do have just a couple of comments to make, mainly from comments I've received from citizens, especially from Ward 5. And I think everyone, even members of the council, even though we may not necessarily demonstrate it, share the same concerns that have been brought out in emails and phone calls, that we do maintain the historic status of these buildings. And I think the design helps bring or pull the 2 buildings, the Civic Center, Music Hall, as well as City Hall, together through the design. So I think that's important. I like Mr. Wilson's recommendation about bringing over the 89er statue, if not in the Civic Center Park, then hopefully at least on City Hall's property in this area somehow, because I do think it's a tremendous statute and we need to give it the proper recognition. But we have listened to our citizens' comments. I think everybody shares the same concern about preserving trees whenever possible, but sometimes that's not always possible. So, but I do think everyone has the same concerns, and I'm not disagreeing with Councilman White, but I think it was helpful to show pictures of the park as it currently exists to help reflect the improvements that I think this design will lead to. It's not a very inviting park as it is, and I am by it 6 days a week between now and April 15th, 7 days a week, and it is not an inviting park, you know, the way it's designed. I'm looking forward to being able to have my lunch. You know, we've got 25 park benches proposed with these new designs. Granted, it'd be nice to retain some of those trees, but, you know, again, it's been presented that that's not possible. I think it's going to be more open, more inviting, and better used. It is not used right now. No one uses it. I'll use it as often as I can, if nothing else, just to have lunch or to walk over there for a break on occasions. Anyway, I don't mean to ramble. But one of the points as far as diversification on these committees, and I think Councilman White's point is well taken, but I would include someone who's at least 60 years old. I was going to say 55, but I'm 57, and sometimes I don't think I'm old enough to serve, because I think it's important to have people who grew up here in the city maybe in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, certainly, to be a part of this process. So not just where they currently live now, but, you know, whether or not they grew up in the city and have that perspective, or in lieu of that, have Bob Blackburn serve on all of these committees to bring that historic perspective. Now, Bob may not want to agree to that. And the other point is, when citizens are asked to participate on these committees, they really need to consider agreeing to that, because it's so frustrating trying to find that diverse membership on these committees and then have, you know, several people just decline the opportunity. Sure, it takes time and effort, but I know, like Mr. Wilson, would certainly put forth the time and effort to participate in that. So, would I propose the design as it currently is presented? I might make a few changes, but I don't know if that's our call necessarily. But I am excited about the future of this park, and I just wanted to make everyone, at least from Ward 5, realize that we have a lot of the same concerns that have been presented to me, and we are trying to address those the best we can. Thank you.
All right. Pat?
Just a brief comment, Your Honor. I was one of the councilmen who got a lot of calls about the trees. And I had a lady set me straight the other night. She said trees are like people. They get old and they die. And so it's not inappropriate to take trees out as they get old. They lose their shapes. They lose their health that way. So I was straightening out there. I'll admit I was an opponent to the park project early on. Some of the preliminary drawings I thought were not appropriate for that area, but I think the people who have done the work now have come up with a good design, and I wholeheartedly support what they've done.
Yeah. I'm excited about the improvements. Look forward to the completion. So good luck to both of you. Any other comments or questions on this item? All right. Thank you, guys. Anything else under city manager reports?
No, sir.
We do have one person that signed up to speak. I talked to Joe Nelson out in the hallway, explained the council's policy that does not allow political candidates or people pushing a political initiative to speak under citizens to be heard. He did have some things he wanted to pass out to the council. I told him he was free to do that, but we do need to adjourn the meeting. We're adjourned.